Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Sad day, horrifying day. Another one of those moments where you go, what exactly is going wrong in our society? What's wrong in this world? How could you be that filled with hatred? How could you be that filled with evil and that filled with just misery and almost at a loss for words? You know, as I woke up to the news and as I woke up to the stories of this horrible shooting, immediately the pundits are jumping where their political views would take them. And my thought was, what kind of a horrible person do you have to be? What kind of a horrible human being? Nobody believing in any faith. I'm sorry. I don't care what faith you are. Nobody can be this evil. And then there are the gun defenders. And the weird thing about it is there's common ground, or there should be. This is extremism. This is religious extremism. This is homophobia. This is hatred. This is the guns. This is all of that stuff wrapped up into one place. And something we will talk about today. I'm interested in your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. But our thoughts, our prayers, our hopes that this ends go out to folks and to the families of the loved ones and those injured and scarred by this. I just wanted to start off with that. But today on the program, I'm going to talk about that. Going to talk about the attacks on education all across the country. Also, the Trump effect. You know, you look at this and it's amazing to me. The more I talk to working class folks, the more I'm struck that we do vote against our own best economic interest. And I came across an article written by Matt Taibbi, who I think is a fantastic journalist. And yes, a journalist at Rolling Stone magazine. What I, as a kid, grew up looking for records and looking, where's the billboard, or Rolling Stone magazine, now one of the investigative journalist locations, to tell you how bad our mainstream media has gotten. But he wrote a really interesting piece about the lessons that are not going to be taken from this Democratic primary. And he points to the Clinton-Obama little fight they had in 2008, even Gore-Bradley back in 2000, all four establishment politic candidates. They were not running as mass populists. The Sanders campaign, as he says, should have sent shockwaves up the spine of the Democratic Party. And, especially when you look at the reality, and as Taibbi points out in the piece, this vote of no confidence is coming from the next generation of voters. Much like Republicans have lost the next generation of voters completely. I mean, they really have. Democrats are doing their damnedest best to make sure that they themselves lose those voters as well and then volley them back so that you keep that generation in play, which is mind-blowing to me, but it is what it is. And as Taibbi points out, the mainstream pundits and the politicos, especially the Washington types, have read the wrong message from what Sanders was talking about. And he went into a little bit about, the view of the general public by Washington insiders, the staffers, and all of that, and how they view the average voter, which is with a very jaundiced eye, which is with, very cross. And as he points out, he goes, the reality is no one really knows what returning power to the voters really does look like. And maybe that's why the pundits and why the political class looked at the Sanders camp with a cross eye, because, he wanted to make and pushed for an honest effort to restore power back to we, the people. And as Taibbi points out, the people in the Capitol in D.C., they don't even know what that means. The only thing they get is this was, palace intrigue is the word I think he used, where someone's trying to grab some power in a very Machiavellian way. And they tried to paint Sanders and are painting Sanders as some kind of a self-centered huckster, some kind of a guy who was running a scheme. He was going to grab power. And that's not Sanders. That's never been Sanders' shtick. That's never been the shtick there. But again, what is when you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's what the political class in this country, that's what they've been trained to think. And look, I look at my Facebook page and I look at the messaging coming out of it, I'm going, wow, I cannot believe how a society has been trained like this. But the reason I bring the Taibbi piece up is one paragraph that immediately caught my attention and it made me go, of course, this is what I've been screaming about forever, as long as I can remember. He writes, the maddening thing about the Democrats is that they refuse to see how easy they could have it. He writes, if the party threw its weight behind a truly populist platform, if it stood behind unions and prosecuted Wall Street criminals and stopped taking giant gobs of cash from every crooked transnational bank and job exporting manufacturer in the world, they would win every election season in a landslide. And look, I've been saying this for the longest time. The first thing I wanted Obama to do when he became president was go after and start the perp walks. Set the example. That was the first thing that I would have done. You crash the economy, somebody's got to be held accountable, because it can't be those poor people who wanted to buy homes. It can't be those folks who took out loans in the hopes of the American dream, only to have their jobs stripped away from them and also everything that they own. But that's what the right was able to paint it. Those poor, those black people in the city that we were forced to give loans to. That's what it was. It wasn't the fact that they came up with financial instruments so complicated that they didn't even understand what they were fiddling with. No, that wasn't it. It was the poor people. And what did we get out of Obama? Nothing. They perp walked no one. And the reason I bring up this Taibbi thing is there's a massive disconnect. And the hope out of this is that Sanders pushing Hillary, and I've been saying this throughout the whole primary, this is good. Competition is good. You get to sharpen your claws, sharpen your game, figure out what it is the other side did well, and then try and take some of that. In a very real way, Hillary has got to connect with the average, everyday working schmuck. She's got to connect with people like me who go to work every day, bust their behind, and at the end of the week go, it's going to be tight. Got to understand what it's like to be a working class person in this country right now. And as Taibbi points out, stand behind unions in a strong way. Give people the ability to increase their wages, to better their lives by the work that they do. That should be the basis of everything that the Democratic Party stands for. And as I've said on this program hundreds, if not thousands of times, right now we've got to figure out who the Democrats are. Because I didn't like the party of Bill Clinton. I did not like the DLC Wall Street Democrats. Didn't like it. And sadly, whether it's fair or not, Hillary is being painted in that same light. So she's got to do something, and this is the only way I see her to be able to push back against the populism that the Donald is putting out. Because people actually think that he knows how they live. He's a businessman. He's a job creator. He's going to help folks like me. No, that's not how this game is going to work. But that's the thought process that people have in their head. And this is what Hillary has to fight against. And the sad reality is, the longer the Democratic Party takes to figure out who they are and what the mass message is, because you ask a conservative, someone who's dragging the knuckles with the mouth gaping open and breathing out the mouth, they know what they're told. They're smaller government, guns and freedom and lower taxes. How all of those things fit into making their lives better, that's a whole nother question. But they know what the marching orders are. Democrats need to figure out what they believe in, because you can't have, I believe in free trade, but I'm against the TPP. Nuance doesn't work. You've got to be for fair and reasonable, fair trade that puts American workers first. Not in that, we're going to parse words. Because I actually saw President Obama on TV. I think it was on Jimmy Fallon, talking about the TPP and creating jobs and using the same failed rhetoric. Just absolutely mind-boggling. But at the end of this, for me, the reality is Democrats have got to push a broad, progressive agenda. The sad thing is will Hillary do that? Will, from behind the safe walls of the Democratic establishment, will she see it? Well, that is what we will find out in the coming weeks and months. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, a quick conversation on how the Democrats, how they can stop the Donald. Stick around. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1914. That was the day that the Miners' Union Day Parade was scheduled in Butte, Montana. In spite of the festivities, trouble was brewing down in the copper mines. Many of the miners were growing increasingly aggravated with the Butte Miners Union Local 1, part of the Western Federation of Miners. Local 1 had been established in 1893, but some thought the union was too closely affiliated with the mine owners. Wages had been stagnant for more than 3 decades, despite the fact that the price of copper had more than doubled during that time. Mine owners stirred the pot even more by hiring Pinkerton detectives to infiltrate the union, instructed to promote violence. The day before the parade, 1,200 miners refused to show their union cards at the Speculator Mine. This meant that they were turned away from work. The next day, the miners' parade was met with jeers and taunts. Some of the protesters chased the union officials, who were riding in the parade on horseback. The angry crowd swelled and decided to attack the union headquarters. They ripped apart the union offices and tore out the union safe. They took the safe to a field and blew off the door with dynamite, finding $1,350 inside. Alderman Frank Curran tried to disperse the crowd, but they tossed him out of the second-story window of the union's office. Fortunately, he landed in a pile of carpeting that had been ripped out by the angry mob. He escaped with a broken arm and dislocated ankle. 10 days later, an unknown assailant blew up the Miners' Union Hall. Citing the violence they had encouraged as an excuse, the mining company declared it would no longer recognize the union. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. On NBC Nightly News, correspondent Hallie Jackson highlighted the June 9th USA Today investigation into Donald Trump's history of refusing to pay his bills.
A USA Today Network special report discovering at least 60 lawsuits, plus hundreds of other liens and judgments over the last 3 decades from people who say Trump and his businesses stiffed them. Not just some of Trump's own lawyers, but a dishwasher, a plumber, waiters, and bartenders. Lots of who you might call little guys. Late tonight, the campaign directed NBC News to statements made by the Trumps. Ivanka insisting it would be irresponsible for her father to pay contractors for work he didn't like. Trump himself arguing that's the kind of attitude the country should have.
As New York Magazine's Jesse Singal writes, quote, "It suggests a guy who views just about any interaction he has with anyone as a chance to get one over on them." Media Matters found that ABC was the only broadcast network to ignore the USA Today report in its June 9th evening and June 10th morning news programs. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Taxes too high, wages too high. We're not going to be able to compete against the world. I hate to say it, but we have to leave it the way it is. People have to go out, they have to work really hard, and they have to get into that upper stratum.
Everything's raising but the wages. Everything's raising but the wages. Gasoline, groceries, and our wages.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. And he hit it right there. Look, taxes too high. A key Republican talking point. And the question I keep coming back to, you hear the Donald say, wages too high. How do you vote for someone who says, we're not going to raise the minimum wage? Not going to happen. Wages too high. You have to work hard like me. Start digging harder. And then you have to get up into my world. And then you'll be okay. Everybody else below you, well, the heck with you. And the question that I keep coming back to is, how is it that working class voters look at him and go, yep, that's our guy? Well, I'm here to answer that question and talk about his most recent piece on how the Democrats and the left can stop Donald Trump. I've got Cole Stangler. He's a staff writer at In These Times. Cole, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, great to be back.
So I guess that's the big question everybody wants to know. How does the left stop the Donald where the right could not?
Yeah, I mean, so part of this obviously is the Democratic Party. You have Hillary Clinton, who is the presumptive nominee, and that's certainly part of the equation. But as I'm kind of trying to point out in this story, is there's kind of a whole different range of different initiatives that the left, broadly speaking, so I mean both labor groups, labor unions, kind of labor-affiliated groups, but also progressive grassroots groups, and just progressives working independently. I mean, what people can do themselves to kind of try to kind of undercut and combat Trump's support, because I think what I attempt to kind of argue in the story here is, as everyone, I'm sure listeners to your show are aware that Bernie Sanders, who looks like is not going to be the nominee, is polling better for a variety of reasons, which we can get into, versus Donald Trump. Now we have Hillary Clinton, who is arguably a weaker candidate versus Trump, and kind of we have a situation right now where it's Clinton is still leading in the polls, but as one of the guys I spoke with, a historian, Christopher Phelps, told me, American history professor at the University of Nottingham, he told me, I don't have a good feeling about this. And I think a lot of people on the left, or people not even consider themselves on the left, can kind of see a scenario here where Trump is able to defeat Clinton.
Well, it scares me. I'll be honest with you, Cole. I don't see Hillary as a great candidate, and not standing on. And maybe that's the media construct. Maybe that's how maybe she'll do a better job of articulating her positions as the campaign goes on. But I think, as Matt Taibbi pointed out in his piece that I just talked about, if the Democrats actually stood on a strong populist platform of standing with unions and prosecuting criminals from Wall Street and standing with working people, that it would be much easier for them to win.
Right. I mean, and obviously the big vulnerability, which I think is really obvious, is this question of trade, which you look back at what does the Clinton legacy mean? People associate it with the 1990s and the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is devastating for working people, depending on the way you count it, destroyed tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs from the United States. You have Clinton associated with Wall Street deregulation. I mean, for better or worse, and we can debate whether that's fair or not to tie her to those policies that took place in the 90s under her husband's reign. I mean, the fact is that perception exists, and that's a real perception. And Trump, as disingenuous as his politics are, has really positioned himself as someone who's going to fight for American jobs and through whatever. He's not really clear about how he's going to do it, but he's going to stick up and stop these trade deals and undo the damage that was done from NAFTA and deals like it. And so I think just on those kind of core economic issues, there's really a real danger here where Trump has kind of portrayed himself as anti-establishment. In Clinton, I mean, it's hard to find someone as really as establishment as Hillary Clinton. I mean, this is someone who was a senator, someone who was the Secretary of State, someone who was First Lady. I mean, you don't really get more established than that.
No, I mean, to be honest, she's probably one of the most qualified people who will ever hold the office if she wins. You can't argue too much of that, but I look at the way you started this article in talking in a story of a guy that in a lower working class neighborhood like where I grew up, the Puritas Ledgmont area there, that's only a couple of miles from the housing project I grew up in. And here's a guy from 1963 on, he was voting for Democrats, now going to vote for Trump. Something moved that needle for him, and jobs, I'm sure, was a big part of that.
Right. And I mean, and you can ask people why they support Trump, and I don't mean this to sound condescending in any way, but there's kind of, people might not be able to fully articulate the reasons why, but there's clearly a kind of disgust and distrust of politics as usual, whatever they are, that people feel, and that's a real feeling. And so I think it'd be a mistake for the Democrats to discount that. I think the fact that Donald Trump has been so successful is really kind of emblematic of that. And so what I get into in the story is there's actually a handful of groups that are trying to kind of get to the bottom of this, of why people are voting for Donald Trump, or doing the best they can to try to combat that. So there's a group called Showing Up for Racial Justice Action. It's a kind of grassroots progressive group that focuses on racial justice issues, talking to white working class people and trying to kind of shift them. And so one of the things that they're doing this election cycle, which I think is interesting, is they're using this technique called deep canvassing, which is basically just engaging in long conversations with voters and doing it in a way where you're really listening to people, as opposed to regular canvassing. You think you show up at someone's doorstep, you tell them what to do. It's a few minutes and you leave. But what these guys are doing in 4 different parts of the country right now, with dozens of different organizers, is trying to have these long conversations with people where they're kind of opening up with these bread and butter economic questions and really trying to have a conversation and get to the core of why people support Trump eventually, and then eventually try to move them. And so this is actually a technique that it started famously or infamously with gay marriage. Gay rights groups were using this, and there was a study that came out that showed it was successful, that was then proven to be actually based on inaccurate data, so that got a lot of attention. However, it was then shown to be to actually successfully shift people's views on transgender rights issues, so people having these long conversations. This is something that Surge is trying to do right now. They were in Cleveland a couple weeks ago. They're going to be going to Minneapolis, St. Paul area as well. They're going to be going to Virginia, and they're going to be going to Louisville as well. So yeah, this is 30 people, 4 days of door knocking each location. It's a really interesting kind of project, but that's one thing people are doing. And then, the other thing that gets brought up a lot, which I think is the other most visible, or the most visible kind of manifestation of anti-Trump activity on the left, or progressives or grassroots people, is these kind of speech disruptions, these protests. And that's a whole other kind of interesting discussion, which maybe we could go into, about whether or not that's an effective way of defeating Trump. And I'll just say this one point on that is I spoke with Rick Perlstein, the historian who wrote Nixonland, and kind of a historian of the American right, and he brought up a really interesting kind of point talking about those protests. Is there's this discussion among some people on the left who say, no, we can't be protesting because, or we should kind of hold off because it's really just fueling this backlash, and it's really not as productive as we think it is. It's making people more likely to support Trump because they see these, young hooligans, coming in here who are detached from real people and whatever, the kind of classic anti kind of activist trope. But what Rick Perlstein told me is if you actually look at kind of the track record of protesting candidates, if you look back to the 60s, actually, 1968, the famous Democratic Convention, Hubert Humphrey and the Democratic Party in that election were associated with disruption and chaos and anger and frustration. And so if you're somebody who's at home watching TV, you see Hubert Humphrey and you associate him with this kind of just disruption and chaos. And so, actually it might sound kind of counterintuitive, but actually, if the protest against Trump could potentially resemble something like that, where you have Donald Trump in the eyes of most Americans is kind of this guy who's associated with, again, just chaos and violence and rage, something that could fuel, votes against him. So I thought that was kind of interesting, an interesting point.
It is an interesting point, and I mean, it will spark a response. And look, I mean, you may get people who are going to identify. I'm not against it, honestly. You make your point, but the thing is when you were talking about this deep canvassing, and immediately I'm thinking about, what a novel concept! Actually talking to people and engaging in something of a conversation. What a novel concept!
Right. I mean, no. Obviously, what it suggests is here that the Democratic Party certainly, and the mainstream. Kind of mainstream liberals have done a really a bad job of talking to working class people, white working class people in particular, in trying to address their concerns. I mean, as the history of this was the old New Deal voting bloc that has gradually shifted more and more to the right. And I think there's a kind of certain segment of liberal intellectuals and liberal media voices who essentially like to blame white working class people for, not knowing what's good for them and being stupid and gullible and racist, really. And that this is kind of a certain element that is gets a lot of play in certain kind of liberal circles. And I think, with that kind of approach, is really blind to really, to what are serious issues and serious suffering and insecurity that these people feel. And the response isn't, in my view, shouldn't be mock these people, look at them, they don't know what's good for themselves, they're racist. But the response is, what's driving people to support somebody like Trump, this kind of politics of despair. And so the left has done a really bad job, again, of doing that for the last few decades.
I agree. No, I mean, at the end of it, I have some very conservative friends who remind me that the left is just as intolerant on certain issues as the right is, and the white working class voter being one of those. But don't you think on some level it's that the progressive groups, the liberal groups, the unions have pretty much stopped talking to that segment of the population, and really right-wing talk radio took over, and Fox News and all of this constant barrage of pointing fingers at the others has taken over?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's correct. I mean, I think there's a certain kind of strategic mindset in the DNC and in the party establishment where they've essentially decided that they don't need these voters to win. Is that you can construct a coalition based on, relying on just the visceral kind of racism of Trump to turn out people of color who have lower incomes. And part of that equation is then you can just abandon this or largely abandon this, this segment of the voting bloc, this segment of the population. And you can see that in the kind of candidates that the DNC supports.
Right. Now, do you think, I look at, this whole process. And I'm still watching the Facebook comments going back and forth of the Hillary and the Bernie supporters, and just how sharp the claws have gotten on the Democratic side. And I look at it as an opportunity to pull Hillary into reality and make her a better candidate, to let her know that there are actual hurting people out there who need help.
Right. Yeah, I mean, actually, I was talking for the story, and I quote him in here, as I spoke with Larry Hanley, the head of the president of the Amalgamated Transit Union, and we were talking about the Clinton campaign, and he knows, he came up in, I think, Staten Island, I believe, working his way up through the union, and so he knew Hillary from back when she was a senator in New York. She was elected in 2000, and his union endorsed Sanders, but he's a guy who really, has a lot of respect for Hillary despite supporting Sanders. And he said something interesting, I thought, which is, he really believes that it's possible to kind of shift Hillary and make her a better candidate. You have certain kind of Sanders supporters who think that Hillary's basically bought off, and that she can't be shifted to really meaningfully care about working people. That kind of certain argument. But what Larry was saying is, he pointed out a really good example, I thought, which was he pointed to the kind of political transformation of Robert F. Kennedy following the assassination of his brother in 1963. So, if you remember, RFK at the beginning of his career, at least in the early 60s, I mean, he was kind of the epitome of the kind of out-of-touch liberal who talked a big game, but was really out of touch and didn't know a whole lot about working people or poor people. And 5 years later, that when he ran for president in 1968, that really changed. And according to Larry Hanley's kind of interpretation of it, it's because RFK took the time to go and visit working people and visit poor neighborhoods, go and do a tour through Appalachia and the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood in Brooklyn in New York. At that time was really an extremely poor and dangerous neighborhood. But that's something that RFK wasn't posturing. It was real. He believed it. And so that was kind of Larry's advice for Hillary, which I think, in my view at least, is pretty spot on. Is that would be good for her. And I guess we'll see how Hillary decides to run this campaign. But that might not be a bad idea for Hillary to spend some more time in kind of these parts of the country rather than visiting, with fundraisers when she takes time to stop in Cleveland, if she does, to actually go and tour these neighborhoods. The neighborhood where Salvador Seda lives, near the airport. These kinds of neighborhoods. And so,
yeah, I mean, right there, the neighborhood I grew up in, and look, that these are not wealthy working class people. These are lower working class folks who are barely making ends meet, and those are the votes that I think you need to be going after. So I think that's great advice that Larry Hanley gave her, and we'll see if it happens. That's the question. Does this move her in the direction of towards Sanders, or does she trip over herself getting back to the middle? We'll see.
Great. Yeah, I mean, and I'll say one last thing here too as well is Trump right now gets solid white working class support. Look at white voters, and it depends on how you define working class, but basically a combination of lower incomes and lower education levels. Trump does really well. He polls really well among those voters. But if you look at the people who voted for him in the primaries, the median income of those voters was relatively high. It was $72,000. The national median is $56,000. I think Hillary and Bernie were around $60K. So what that suggests is Trump is really popular with white working class voters. They just don't vote as much as the higher income ones, as the middle class ones. So Trump really kind of coasted on those middle class voters while benefiting from the working class support. But this is all to say that the general election really comes down to, is Trump going to be able to really mobilize those voters en masse and get them to come out? That's the question that's up in the air right now. Because if Trump wins, that's the scenario that's going to happen.
Let me ask you a last line of questioning I've got for you, because, as they're doing this deep canvassing, and did you have the opportunity to ask? Because one of the frames I hear from all of my friends who are going to be voting for Trump, outside of the racism, outside of the building the wall and all of the xenophobia, outside of that is the frame that he's a businessman. He's going to run the country like a business, and it's going to create jobs. He's going to do for the country what he did for himself. Yet, as we're looking at his business dealings, it didn't look like he did all that great, other than promoting himself. Do you think that frame eventually goes away?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you probably have the DNC, in the Clinton campaign. I'm sure will be pointing out the tremendous failures of all his various businesses, from Trump steaks to the universities. But I think also when we're talking about kind of where his support comes from with these voters, and I think the AFL is going to be trying to do this a lot, and you already see it in some of the ads they're putting out. But really just actually kind of separating the rhetoric from what Trump. What are the policies that he actually supports? He wants to lower taxes on the super rich. He supports national right to work. He said that in an interview. So how can you care about working people and support national right to work? He thinks the minimum wage is too high. He later backtracked, but he said it. So I think people are really going to be trying to point to what are the actual policies he supports, and kind of contrasting that with the kind of face that he puts up, and the kind of image that he's carefully kind of constructed.
So again, we're going to end up back in one of those election cycles where the Democrats and the left are going to be arguing fact, and the folks on the right are going to be arguing emotion and narrative. Should be interesting. Cole, a great piece, though. I hope folks will go take a look at it, how the left can stop Trump. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Cole Stangler's name. Take you right there. Great. Always great talking with you, Cole. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's take a quick break. Right back. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. I'm the talk.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report recorded on Monday, June 13th, 2016. I'm Mark Boulanger. Sunday, June 12th, was the International Day Against Child Labor, a day set aside by the United Nations to remind people that there are still 168 million child laborers in the world. Just recently, the International Labour Organization held a special conference on the issue as a way of re-energizing efforts to eliminate all child labor, especially its worst forms, such as children working in mines. The ILO has produced 2 suggested international laws about various aspects of child labor called Conventions 138 and 182. One of the speakers at the special ILO conference was Philip Jennings, the General Secretary of UNI, the Global Union for Skills and Services.
The time for excuses from business is over. If a business can subcontract its tax affairs to some remote destination, there is no excuse whilst they can't discover in their supply chains where their suppliers are using child labour. The time for excuses is over. The political winds have changed. We have the Ruggie principles in place. We have OECD guidelines in place. And we simply don't buy the argument that it's all the fault of government. We want business to accept its responsibility and to work with the social partners and local governments to ensure that child labour isn't a reality. Globally, as a global union movement, each of the global unions is engaged in this campaign in their different sectors. Each of us have global framework agreements with business. We enter into a conversation about human rights and about trade union rights and collective bargaining, and ensuring that 138 and 182 are applied in the life of the business, locally and on the ground. Give the right to organise, the right to negotiate, and a right to a voice, and then we can help eliminate the extent of child labour that we see. We will never give up in this endeavour until we have eradicated child labour from this planet. It remains a priority for us. It remains a priority for local unions, unions in each of the continents, and at a global level. It is clear that we can get the job done.
Another speaker at the special ILO conference on child labor was Andrews Tago. Mr. Tago is the head of the Rural Workers Program of the General Agricultural Workers Union of Ghana.
We believe that it is time to call child labor history, and it is everyone's responsibility. I'm just sharing with you a model that the trade unions and the employers and the tripartite general have developed together at a community level that we call the Toko model. When we say Toko, Toko is a small village on the Volta Lake in the Volta region of Ghana, a community that decided to develop systems, to activate its own systems to ensure that every child is in school. In Pando Toko, in the Volta region, children as young as 5 get up early in the morning around 4 a.m. to go into the lake to cast out nets. And in the process, they subject themselves to inhumane weather conditions. In the afternoon, when the nets that they have spread gets entangled in the Lake Volta. The Lake Volta is a man-made lake, so it has a lot of shrubs and trees under the lake. This net gets entangled under the lake, and these children will have to dive down there to go and disentangle and remove the nets. But majority of them do not go to school at all. And it is for this reason that the union began a process of mobilizing the fishermen, mobilizing the fish processors, mobilizing and organizing the communities to address the issues that affect them. That is a community-initiated, community-owned, and community-driven processes that address child labor.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Follow us on Twitter @RadioLabor. Reporting from Geneva, I'm Mark Boulanger. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Susan sent me a Boston Globe article, and with the title, "No Parent Should Have to Go Through This," and this Boston Globe article goes through evidently one of the people killed in the shooting texted his mother at 2:00 in the morning, and there's this back and forth between the mother and the son, and it just you think about the horror, you think about the uncertainty, and no parent should have to go through that. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world. And in Washington D.C., Victoria Jones, Talk Media News Service. Victoria, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you very much.
So I guess the tragedy, horror, just wow. I mean, I'm struggling with this. Another one of these horrific mass shootings.
I know. This one, it's beyond. You almost need to find a different word than mass shooting, because that's become almost tame at this point. Mass shooting, it can mean anything from 5 people to 10 people to 13 people. When I woke up Sunday morning, I saw 20 people had been shot dead, and it was like, oh, that's dreadful. And I had to go back to sleep because I woke up early, and when I woke up again, it was 50, and it was like, I don't think I'm seeing it right.
Yeah, I mean, we went through the exact same thing, and then I was waiting all day long as I was following the Twitter feeds and the comments and some of the news reports, and you just you see the really polar opposite barbs being thrown back and forth, and to me, it was frustrating as all can be.
Yeah, very, very frustrating. and will continue to be. Now, President Obama tried to make the point today when he was speaking to some reporters that already it's evolved into that it has to be or either all about terrorism or all about gun control, that it's either or. And he's saying, no, it doesn't. It's not either or. It's both and.
Exactly. I mean, when did we become such a black and white society that it can only be one or the other, that there isn't a bunch of forces at play, and not to mention bad parenting on top of it? Because if you look at the father, this is no good guy either.
Well, the father's strange. Now, the father has denounced his son and says he doesn't forgive him.
Yeah, I mean, but
telling you.
I was looking at some of the things written about him today, and that kind of intolerance, that kind of stuff that he's pushing onto this kid, that's got to play into this as well to an extent.
Well, you wonder, and the other thing is we don't know when this man became radicalized. We don't know how recent it is. We don't, for example. According to FBI Director James Comey in his briefing today, this killer had claimed both to be affiliated with Al-Qaeda. He'd also claimed to be affiliated with Hezbollah. Well, Al-Qaeda is a Sunni terrorist group. Hezbollah is a Shia terrorist group. They are at odds with each other. Serious odds with each other.
Exactly. So how much of this, because, immediately I got emails from people going, see, this is the radical Islamo fascist terrorists coming after us. I'm going, I actually don't know.
We don't know. He may be some kind of violent radical jihadist. We don't know. But of what nature, we don't know. Also, The Guardian is reporting, and the FBI seems to be confirming to them, that when they investigated him in 2013, it was because he'd been boasting to co-workers that he knew the Tsarnaev brothers who committed the Boston bombing terrorist act. And so the FBI investigated that and found out that it was completely untrue. He'd made it up.
So now...
But then in 2014, they investigated that a claim of his that he was somehow connected to this American who he lived quite close to, who became a suicide bomber in Syria. He made that up too.
So it sounds like this is a guy who has just had some serious mental illness problems.
Yeah.
So the question that then comes to me is, you have all of this background. How does this guy get an AR-15? How does he get the gun?
He's holding down a job.
Yeah, I get that. I do. But at some point, if you're claiming to be associated with these kind of people, I don't know. I'm struggling.
I'm struggling too. I'm struggling why, after these two claims, why the FBI didn't say there's something fundamentally off about this guy. Now, I'm not putting any blame on her. I don't know whether his ex-wife ever reported him for what sounds like very serious domestic violence, which would have added to the mix. I don't know whether she ever reported any of that. There was no onus on her to do so. She may have been too traumatized by it. But that might have added to the mix. So that that's something else.
Yeah, it's a whole. This guy just sounds like a whole bunch of crazy and a whole bunch of trouble. But now you've got the finger being pointed at Democrats, which I understand Democrats are introducing a new gun law. Is that right?
Well, Senate Democrats, Chuck Schumer and some Democrats held a conference call with reporters today, and what they want to do is they want to make a new push for a particular bill that would prohibit people on the terror watch list from purchasing guns or explosives anywhere in the United States. Now, this law failed last year, 53 of 54 Senate Republicans voted against it, and they want to make another push for the bill.
So now let me ask you, how many of those Republicans who voted against it are the ones who sent out condolences to the people murdered over the weekend?
I'm sure a lot of them did.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have a problem with that. I mean, if you've done nothing to try and stop that, it just seems, back to, it just seems wrong to me.
But I'm not sure that he was on the terror watch list.
Okay, we haven't seen that yet. You're right.
No, we haven't seen it yet. But it's something that, they're saying could be done. There is Slate. Now, who is it? Forrest Wickman. No, Iger Volsky, who writes for Slate, has been trolling Republican congressmen, senators, and representatives on Twitter as they tweeted their condolences on Sunday, saying that, like Senator Ron Johnson would, my thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families and the brave men and women who risked their lives to save others, at 10:41 in the morning. Iger Volsky would then tweet, at Sen Ron Johnson, accepted 1.3 million plus from gun rights groups. So all you'll get are his hashtag thoughts and prayers. And he did this throughout the day with everybody, like at Senator Burr, Scott, $32,792 in expenditures from at NRA. So his only response to biggest mass shooting will be this tweet. And he did this it looks like he did it all day.
Wow, I didn't see it, and I know Igor, so
I'll send you the link. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look that up.
I'm sending it to you now.
Because, that was one of the things that I was, as I'm seeing these people who have put gun bill after gun bill after gun bill down and continued to make sure that people with mental illness can, go and get what they want. It just sat in the back of my mind. Just sad.
I sent it.
Let's move on to a different topic. I understand the Urban Institute has a new study out on what might happen if Obamacare were to be repealed.
They have found that if Obamacare were repealed, 24 million fewer people would have health insurance in 2021. 14.5 million fewer would have coverage through Medicaid or the Children's Health Insurance Program, and 8.8 million fewer would have individual private coverage. Another 700,000 fewer would have health insurance through their jobs. Now, at the same time, repeal would reduce federal government spending on health care by $927 billion over 10 years, the study finds. However, the Congressional Budget Office has found that despite the lower spending, the deficit would increase because Obamacare's tax increases and Medicare cuts would also be repealed. And state health spending would also increase without Obamacare by $68.5 billion, the study finds, as states would have to pick up more of the cost of care for people who lacked insurance.
And this is not a good thing then, right? I mean, because I'm listening to this, the numbers sound actually kind of low because I start thinking about all the people who are now going to be rushing to the emergency room and all of the things that are, the rates that are going to go up on everybody else and all the chaos that would ensue. So what is their suggestion then?
Well, I don't know that they have suggestions. Well, they're saying they're not good. They're saying it would. They're saying that the reduction in government spending comes at a cost in other areas because the number of uninsured people would increase by 24 million. They say modest and low-income families would forego health care because of cost and lack of coverage, and health care providers would end up paying for more uncompensated care. The article that I have does not say what they suggest people should do.
Yeah, I would have to think don't do it would be the first suggestion.
That might be a thought.
Yeah, don't give the Republicans their biggest wish list item, which is to cause mass chaos. And then, as I've been saying, their alternative plan is very simple, and you can fit it on a bumper sticker: pay or die.
Yes, I've heard you say that before.
That's where I haven't seen any other plan yet. Have you?
I haven't, but House Speaker Paul Ryan is rolling out the 6 planks of his A Better Way agenda.
Yeah, I'm holding my breath on that.
The health plank is going to be coming out in coming weeks.
Yeah, I'm waiting with bated breath. I hope it's every bit as good as his anti-poverty one was.
I imagine you will find it a rare treat.
Sad stuff. And a sad day, Victoria. I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Always great talking to you, Victoria Jones, Talk Media News Service. You want to check out their website, talkmedianewsservice.com. It's just, horrible. I mean, just a horrible tragedy. When we come back here in the second hour, we're going to talk with Thomas Bishop from Media Matters for America. Take a look at how our media structure, how have the pundits been playing this? How has the message been rolled out? And, I got to be honest, I'm seeing some of the Fox News stuff, and it's really ticking me off, especially Geraldo Rivera and some of his, you got to be in there and you got to fight back kind of rhetoric. Yeah, someone's got a gun in there, and they're literally spraying bullets everywhere. Yeah, jump right up into that, Geraldo. Sad stuff. Anyway, if you've missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. And take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Roseanne DeMauro of National Nurses United was a Bernie Sanders pick to sit on the 15-member DNC Platform Writing Committee, but the DNC refused to accept her because she represents organized labor. You heard that right. Democrats told Sanders his pick could not be on the committee because she's union. Only one other retired labor person is on the committee. DeMauro spoke out about it on KPFA Pacifica's Workweek Radio.
The critical point here is there's 15 people in this drafting committee. They chose someone who I believe is a retiree from AFSCME. And you think about how bad the DNC actually is, because working people built this country. They built the Democratic Party, and now they think it's overrepresented with one person. It's really outrageous, and it's a slap in the face to the American people, and it's why the Democratic Party is losing so many people, and will continue to lose them, frankly.
DeMauro says she would have used her position on the DNC Platform Committee to push for single-payer health care, Medicare for all. She says she would have been open about it with the American people as the committee wrote the platform. DeMauro says big changes are needed in the Democratic Party to honor and respect rather than marginalize labor.
The corporate class controls both parties. This symbolizes more than anything is the fact that they think that basically pushing labor aside is okay. It's become okay. And that tells you everything of why the Democratic Party isn't okay.
AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says the Democratic Party platform must offer a comprehensive, integrated vision of how we can rewrite the rules to raise wages for all working people and make our government a partner in our hopes for better lives. Trumka says the key to addressing wage stagnation and inequality is rebuilding workers' bargaining power. A bold Democratic Party agenda is needed, Trumka says, to address a range of serious issues facing working people, from opposing trade deals like the TPP to modernizing and putting teeth into labor laws. Trumka says the Democratic vision of America is that we are stronger together. Trumka says the Democratic platform must strengthen and expand Social Security and Medicare, offer comprehensive immigration reform and financial policies that support Main Street jobs and small businesses, not more speculation on Wall Street.
Workers Independent News is heard daily on The Rick Smith Show, live 3 to 6 p.m. coast to coast at thericksmithshow.com. The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So Hillary Clinton said, as president, I will make identifying and stopping lone wolves a top priority. And is this what this guy was? And look, I have no interest in saying his name. At some point, I blame the media for making stars and putting these people's names all over the place. Not going to do it. But this person filled with hate and intolerance and I would have to say severely mentally deranged and ill, just perpetrated one of the most heinous things that I can remember. And here to talk a little bit about how our media is framing it, I've asked Thomas Bishop to come talk with us. He's an associate researcher over at Media Matters for America. Thomas, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So I look at this and, I got to be honest, I'm not saying the guy's name. I don't think anyone should. There should be a blackout on that. But this is a horrible tragedy that our media culture just seems to be to just thrive on and suck up. At least that's my thought on it.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. And a lot of the media has agreed with what you're doing in not saying the person's name or putting their picture up, because this perpetuates that. But we've also seen a lot of media outlets say that and then do it anyway, because they want those ratings, and it's a 24-hour media just firestorm, and they need to fill up that time with something, and they go back on their own morals and judgment.
How much do you think, and maybe this is just too much of a personal opinion question, but I look at all of the attention that these shooters get. I look at all of the attention that these people who are struggling with mental illness get, and I can only imagine that somebody who, like this guy, who all of the reports that I'm reading point to, this was a guy who suffered from mental illness, wanted to be like the two idiots up in Boston, wanted to be like the guy in Syria, wanted to identify with that crowd. How much do you think it is our media that pushes this on folks?
I mean, it really doesn't help. We're talking about this perpetrator of this terrible tragedy, and it has taken and it will continue to take a little bit of time to learn and get information on every single victim and what their stories are. And if you have these types of people with these delusions of grandeur, there are no better motivations than seeing the type of coverage that we see, good and bad, when these types of things happen.
I've spent a bunch of time looking at news clips and watching different reports only because I sit in this chair. To be honest, I wanted to turn it off within minutes. But I saw a clip of Geraldo Rivera, which just kind of sickened me. Because he was almost like he was blaming the people for not attacking this guy with a semi-automatic weapon, and it just made me think that maybe the reporting isn't so much reporting as it's opinion stuff.
Absolutely, and he said these types of things before, that people should be fighting their attackers in all different types of scenarios, and that's a big right-wing narrative out there right now, is that if we didn't have these soft targets and safe spaces and everyone is allowed to have a gun, we couldn't stop one person from coming in with this weapon and doing this. what if 300 people were in this facility or any facility with weapons? How do you control that? What do you do with that? And why aren't we talking about the thing that you brought up in the first place, which is the mental illness, and why we haven't been able to have a realistic conversation in Congress about passing legislation to stop people from this, like getting weapons when we do find out that they have problems. This one was a very difficult situation because he had a job that made it a little bit easier for him to get a weapon and to get one, expediently, but, not to have the realistic conversation, not to have a vote so that we know where everyone stands, and for the media to let that go, I think is an assault on all of us. And what we have all agreed on as Americans, when you look at polls on mental illness, that by far we all agree on.
Yeah. I mean, I look at this guy, and if you've been interviewed by the FBI claiming that you know the two idiots up in Boston and the other guy, that you know these terrorists, somebody should be looking into you. And you brought up where he had worked. He worked for this, I think it was G4S security firm, which deemed him not a threat. And, I looked at their website, and according to their website, they say G4S secures your people, property, and assets by understanding and mitigating security risks. I got to think this isn't going to be good for their business either.
Absolutely. And thankfully, we've had a few steps in the right direction with a recent federal court ruling finding that open carry, or concealed carry, I should say, isn't a constitutional right.
Right.
In many states, you have to explain why you need concealed carry. And, it's not a hard thing to do, but some people don't even want that little bit of check and regulation, and you've seen the courts push back a little bit, and we also need the media and our legislators to also make that push to say the Second Amendment is a great and wonderful amendment that we have, but where are the restrictions that we all agree that we need to have on everything being allowed, and how we regulate that?
Again, the right wing is pushing this. If there's only a good guy in there with a gun frame, and of course it's not the gun that did it frame as well. Personally, I'm someone who says, do we really need to have AR-15s? Do sportsmen really need to have semi-automatic weapons? Maybe it's just my view on it. I don't think that the Second Amendment had envisioned a weapon of that kind when they said everyone should have the right to bear arms. I just don't think they envisioned it.
That's why we've had amendments, and we've changed the amendments over time, and we've had to have court cases and the Supreme Court to answer whether different parts of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights actually do mean what we're saying they mean now, because it was a different time. It was a different era. The weapons they had and what they were looking to defend against was a tyrannical government. That's not the same thing that we're talking about right now. And, just alluding back to what you said earlier, this blaming the safe space, and we've also seen them blame the president for this attack that this individual did. That was an absolute, act of terrorism, and nothing he does is good enough to the right wing when we're looking at these types of attacks.
Yeah, that's the thing. Nothing this president can do is right. We already know that. But then you had Donald Trump calling for him to step down because he wouldn't say radical Islam. I don't know that I buy that that he was part, and maybe I'll be proven wrong. I don't know. But from what I see and what I've seen in front of me, I don't know that he was part of ISIL or ISIS or Hezbollah or whomever he claimed to be part of. I'm not buying it.
And I mean, if this was the first time we heard that, you know, it would be shocking. But they've said that about the Benghazi attacks. They've said that about the attacks in Belgium, attacks in France, San Bernardino. You know, we've seen the exact same thing happen many, many times over when we get these terrible attacks. And, you know, it stops us from having the conversation about mental illness. It stops us from having the conversation about who should have weapons if they're being followed by the FBI, and when we stop that.
Good point. But the other part of this is, you know, there's a lot that goes into this, and it's, you know, what I've seen presented to me is either or stuff. It's the guns, or it's the terrorism, or it's the homophobia. Personally, I think it's all of that. We've got a culture that almost wants to push guns down every kid's throat, and we've got a culture that wants to go back to stoning gays, and wants us to have the next round of the Crusades. It just seems we're in this weird, very bizarre time.
And Donald Trump is evidence of that. And you've seen a lot of people get behind those comments that he's made. You know, we're back to talking about banning entire groups of people from the United States and building walls. Like this was a conversation that was had with Sean Hannity just 20 minutes ago about banning these people who are from Syria. This had nothing to do with Syria building a wall, and this was a homegrown terrorist attack. And you see xenophobia and anti-Muslim rhetoric that, you know, pervades around these sorts of things in the media and with our political candidates out there.
But don't you see that there's the possibility of people, you know, because you look at Maslow's hierarchy of need, you go down to the very bottom where most voters seem to find themselves, and it's easy to fear people into thinking that the others are coming. There's a boogeyman around every corner, and if we could just push all them out, we would be fine here in our little corner. Can't you see how that argument works very well, though?
Absolutely. I mean, this is how we have the presumptive Republican nominee. That's what he has won his support based off of, is just going to this one subgroup of America and saying, I am only here for you. So we've seen anti-Hispanic rhetoric, anti-African American rhetoric, you know, gendered rhetoric, and just even discussions that he's made that have attacked people with disabilities in different ways. And there are many people who like every single thing that he's saying, and this is what we've devolved to, is this anti-Muslim, xenophobic presidential candidate, and the media and the right-wing media are following suit.
Yeah, but what do you say to the person, and I get this a lot, that, you know, the Islamic culture, the Muslims, they're violent and they behead each other, and you're never going to get that out of them. So you can't mix the two societies.
I mean, we know that not to be true. I mean, I'm in the military. Most of the people that we fight alongside in our fight against terrorism and extremism overseas have been Muslims. You know, we fight alongside them. The Kurdish fighters are doing the most against ISIL right now. And we have lived in harmony with every single group that's out there in the United States. And it isn't what arguably, it is absolutely what's made us stronger as a culture and better as a culture, is being able to have more immigrants than any other country on earth, and being a welcoming society. You know, that has helped us. Having Hispanic, you know, immigrants come in and working here actually builds up our economy. Having people from India and China. These are really, really important things that we've been able to do, having those visas, because they've built us up. We're getting really great people to come to this country. And even the refugees we've seen incredible people doing incredible things. And to even try to have a discussion about stopping those people and stopping, a few years ago, the young kids who were fleeing the violence in Central America. Like, that's not what America is. It never has been, and we shouldn't be having a conversation about that in the future. That's not going to make us great again, because that's never been who we are.
Yeah, good point. So last line of questioning then. Would you then make the argument that this is just about religious extremism? I mean, because I got to be honest, I'm as fearful of the Sharia-loving Muslims as I am the extreme right-wing, white, evangelical crazies that I see here in this country.
I mean, it is about crazy individual people. I mean, the people who have lauded this attack the most aren't other Muslims. You've seen Muslim groups come out and deride this in the strongest of terms. It was Westboro Baptist Church who lauded this attack and praised it. And whatever you think about their background, they aren't Muslims. I don't know what to call them.
Lunatics.
Absolutely, and those are the people who carry out these attacks.
Sad stuff. So what do you expect us to see here in the next couple of days? When does this go away?
Sadly, I mean, these types of attacks, especially with something like Sandy Hook, we have a really important conversation. We do get, the right versus left and the media saturation on different politicization of these events, and then we ignore it completely, and nothing happens on these things. And I would like to hear us talk about mental illness and actually have a vote on it. I would like to see us have a conversation about what types of regulations would make us safer, and maybe looking into funding gun research and mental illness research, which we no longer do the way that we did 15 years ago.
Yeah, something has to be done, and my fear is that the political rhetoric again continues to gridlock us and gum everything up, and nothing gets done. That's the horrible tragedy in this as well. Thomas, I appreciate you taking time. I appreciate your thoughts.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
Great talking with you. Thomas Bishop, Associate Research Director there at Media Matters for America. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1991. That was the day that a San Francisco man, Jeffrey Collins, received $5.3 million for wrongful termination from Shell Oil. The judge ruled the company had fired Jeffrey because they found out he was gay. Jeffrey had been a second-generation Shell employee. His dad worked for the company for 37 years before retiring. Jeffrey worked for their Triton Biosciences division. He oversaw a team working on developing drugs for cancer, AIDS, and other diseases. For 19 years, he had received positive reviews and 9 promotions. He rose to become the second highest executive for Triton. All of that changed when management found an invitation to a party for gay men that Jeffrey planned to attend. and for that, they fired him. The company claimed they made this decision after reevaluating his performance. They stated that they felt Jeffrey could not be effective as a leader once his team learned of his off-the-job activities. After his firing, Jeffrey could not find a similar job. Despite all of this, he was willing to settle out of court for far less money. But Shell decided to fight the wrongful termination charges. Cases such as the one brought by Jeffrey helped to bring to light the employment discrimination faced by many in the LGBT community. Since his case, California, along with 28 other states and the District of Columbia, have passed laws prohibiting firings based on sexual orientation. 32 states have laws against discrimination based on gender identity. 434 of the Fortune 500 companies have implemented similar policies. Yet, despite these gains, protecting and improving LGBT rights on the job remains an important fight for today's labor movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
Government standoffs have almost become standard fare in American politics, yet when one arises, media attention abounds. In fact, it's argued by some that the media coverage spurring the public's attention helps prolong what becomes months-long sieges. Sometimes the coverage draws sympathy for the protesters' cause, and many of these standoffs don't end well. Two of the more famous government sieges occurred in the 1990s. First was Randy Weaver's Ruby Ridge standoff in 1992, and then in the following year came the notorious 51-day siege by the government against David Koresh and the Branch Davidian Ranch outside Waco, Texas. The siege at Waco became a 24/7 news event. But before CNN and Fox, before cable and 24-hour TV networks, and prior to the internet and social media came Dennis Banks and Russell Means. Join us again for a second battle at Wounded Knee. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Andy on line one. Andy, what's going on, man?
Rick, how you doing?
I am good. I appreciate the call. What's on your mind?
Well, I didn't want to talk about what went on in Florida over the weekend, which, of course, is a tragic situation, but we know if we did what we had to do as a country, like Australia has done, get those friggin' weapons out of the market, out of the country, the weapons that are just used for assaulting other human beings and used in a military environment, we'd be a lot better off.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
That's the bottom line.
To me, there's no rational, sane reason for you to need a semi-automatic or an automatic weapon. I mean, there's just I don't see it. I don't see you going out hunting or any of that stuff with it. Just that simple.
Right. I think in Australia they knocked down the amount of deaths by gun by 90% just by doing that. I mean, it's just it's all it is, and we don't have the ability as a democracy to pull that off.
Well, do you think it's that we've sold ourselves on the idea that that's freedom and that's going to keep us able to water the tree of liberty with the blood of patriots and all of that rhetoric that we grew up believing?
Jesus, I find that to be just utter baloney. The problem is, I think of Hunter S. Thompson, who used to always say, "I should have a gun. You shouldn't have a gun because I can't trust you."
Yeah, and then didn't he blow his head off?
Yeah, couldn't trust himself either.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. But, I look at this and I've, it's one of these things where I've had a very nuanced position on guns because I've lived in two very different neighborhoods. And I've talked about this before. As a kid growing up in the housing project, you saw somebody walking down the street with a gun. They were going to kill somebody. It was usually a .38 special. It was usually a handgun that they found somewhere for a couple of bucks. I now live in a neighborhood where, there's a free gun range just within, biking distance of my house. Where people are out there and they're target shooting and they're doing that stuff. There's a different view and a different culture. And I struggle with the idea of going, we're going to take all the guns. But at least we should be able to agree on things that you're going to be able to, like an AR-15 or some of these semi-automatic that can be converted into automatic. Those should absolutely go.
Right, like we had 10 years ago, the assault weapons ban. And when the forefathers wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and you brought up this point, they had gunshot and muskets.
Yep. In fact,
they didn't have the weapons we have today. Nobody foresaw this, and it was written into the Constitution too for the slave trade, to keep the South in line, to be able to bring back the slaves and have posses and things. That's why it was there.
Also, the other part of the sentence that people seem to forget is that well-regulated militia thing.
Absolutely. They seem to forget that part about it, too.
And I remember
it's totally been butchered and taken out of context.
Right, but I remember the whole, during the Obamacare argument, evidently back during the George Washington years, one of the laws that they passed is that every male had to buy a musket, had to have so many pounds of powder, so many pounds of wadding, so some kind of a backpack, had a whole laundry list of things that they had to purchase. And I remember arguing, well, George Washington mandated that everyone basically be their own army. Healthcare shouldn't be that far of a reach, but the idea, and I do believe the intent, was a well-regulated militia, not some yahoo to get an AR-15 and shoot up a bar.
Well, they didn't want a professional army, and they knew what professional armies can do, and it would be used by the king against the people. They wanted a citizens' army, and that's where all that came from.
And that's where our history is lost. Because I often tell people there's only one branch of the military that was ever supposed to be a standing branch, and that was obviously the Navy, to keep trading lines open.
Right. And you had the War of 1812 where the White House was actually burnt down. Those sorts of things. There was a definite threat out there. But I really caught what I want to talk about. Have you been talking about California? We got 2.5 million, 3 million votes that have yet to be counted.
Yeah, I saw that over the weekend.
And we have a party that runs this state called the Democratic Party, which owns this place, that just didn't prepare for these new voters. Just didn't have those Democratic ballots ready to hand out.
Well, when the decision's already made, why do you need to go through all those formalities, Andy?
Yeah, why friggin' vote? Well, especially when you have somebody like the AP coming out. The second biggest day of electoral voting in the country. 6 states vote, 830 delegates. The next day to Super Tuesday, and you call the election. Boy, that'll tamp down the voting public a little bit, you think?
Look, I'm not thrilled about what I've seen on the Democratic side. But, and this is where the Sanders camp has to decide where they're going to go. Do they sue? Do they continue? Do they push on into the convention? I'm hoping they do. I'm hoping that this is a very interesting convention.
Oh, absolutely. Because the votes aren't going to be counted till something like mid-July for California.
But the sad reality in this then comes, as you're pursuing all of this other stuff, Trump goes unattacked, and my fear is he becomes president.
Wasn't my call. Democratic Party decided to give us a neoliberal freak who even my father, when the Clintons were in office, just couldn't believe that he was elected then in the 90s and knew and forecast. My father forecast, being a UAW worker himself and a shop steward, that the Clintons really did in the labor movement then. They really did it in during the 90s. And just for his sake, I will never place on a ballot a Clinton. I don't care what.
I hear
They've
that
already
a lot.
done the damage.
I hear it a lot.
And they'll just do more.
I hear that a lot, Andy.
But that wasn't my call to make her run and to give her the election before the whole ball game was started. You know, that was the leadership of the which has to go too. The leadership of the Democratic Party.
Well, I mean, the hope is what comes out of this is the grassroots organizing that I've been hoping for at least 20 years now. We'll see where this takes us. Andy,
Well, it's supposed to be a revolution.
We will
got
see.
to continue it.
I'm still hoping. I'm still hopeful. Andy, I appreciate the call, man.
All right, big time.
Always great talking with you.
Cover some new subjects. Forget about the death.
Yeah. We're moving on. Thanks.
It's pretty
Appreciate
heinous. Take care.
Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report recorded on Monday, June 13th, 2016. I'm Mark Boulanger. Sunday, June 12th, was the International Day Against Child Labor, a day set aside by the United Nations to remind people that there are still 168 million child laborers in the world. Just recently, the International Labour Organization held a special conference on the issue as a way of re-energizing efforts to eliminate all child labor, especially its worst forms, such as children working in mines. The ILO has produced 2 suggested international laws about various aspects of child labor called Conventions 138 and 182. One of the speakers at the special ILO conference was Philip Jennings, the General Secretary of UNI, the Global Union for Skills and Services.
The time for excuses from business is over. If a business can subcontract its tax affairs to some remote destination, there is no excuse whilst they can't discover in their supply chains where their suppliers are using child labour. The time for excuses is over. The political winds have changed. We have the Ruggie principles in place. We have OECD guidelines in place. And we simply don't buy the argument that it's all the fault of government. We want business to accept its responsibility and to work with the social partners and local governments to ensure that child labour isn't a reality. Globally, as a global union movement, each of the global unions is engaged in this campaign in their different sectors. Each of us have global framework agreements with business. We enter into a conversation about human rights and about trade union rights and collective bargaining and ensuring that 138 and 182 are applied in the life of the business, locally and on the ground. Give the right to organise, the right to negotiate and a right to a voice, and then we can help eliminate the extent of child labour that we see. We will never give up in this endeavour until we have eradicated child labour from this planet. It remains a priority for us. It remains a priority for local unions, unions in each of the continents, and at a global level. It is clear that we can get the job done.
Another speaker at the special ILO conference on child labor was Andrews Tago. Mr. Tago is the head of the Rural Workers Program of the General Agricultural Workers Union of Ghana.
We believe that it is time to call child labor history, and it is everyone's responsibility. I'm just sharing with you a model that the trade unions and the employers and the tripartite general have developed together at the community level that we call the Toko model. When we say Toko, Toko is a small village on the Volta Lake in the Volta region of Ghana, a community that decided to develop systems, to activate its own systems to ensure that every child is in school. In Pando Toko, in the Volta region, children as young as 5, get up early in the morning around 4 a.m. to go into the lake to cast out nets. And in the process, they subject themselves to inhumane weather conditions. In the afternoon, when the nets that they have spread gets entangled in the Lake Volta. The Lake Volta is a man-made lake, so it has a lot of shrubs and trees under the lake. This net gets entangled under the lake, and these children will have to dive down there to go and disentangle and remove the nets. But majority of them do not go to school at all. And it is for this reason that the union began a process of mobilizing the fishermen, mobilizing the fish processors, mobilizing and organizing the communities to address the issues that affect them. That is a community-initiated, community-owned, and community-driven processes that address child labor.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Follow us on Twitter @Radio Labor. Reporting from Geneva, I'm Mark Boulanger. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Doing to our institutions of higher learning, and you just gotta be scared to death. I mean, I saw this report, and again, it's one of these things that just jumps out at you, and you go, not surprising, nothing surprised here. The fact that we're not investing in public education, especially in public universities, and there's a massive decline in the amount of research, and guess what? The public is skeptical of the research that's coming out. No kidding. So when I see this story in The Guardian that looks at these statin drugs, evidently this team of researchers looked at 19 previously released reviewed studies and determined that the people who were taking statin drugs to lower their high LDL levels, because they had high cholesterol, had no difference in death rates than the people who didn't take the drugs and didn't have high LDL levels. There was no difference. And you go, how did we get sold on this idea that, you know what? You got to take these drugs. Could it be the drug industry? And now we look here at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, where they're talking about getting rid of 400 faculty members, adjunct professors who are part of the union there, because they've got a $22.3 billion deficit. What is that going to mean? It's going to mean another major research university having to beg corporate America, going to have to beg them for funding. Not good at all. And here to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world of higher ed, our good friend Kevin Mahoney, editor zero at the Raging Chicken Press, also host of Out to Coop Radio. Kevin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, anytime, Rick. I'll tell you, that lead-in of the University of Massachusetts story and what's been happening with the research, the state system of higher education in Pennsylvania has the solution, all right? Our state is not going to go the way other ones. What they're going to do is they're going to cut faculty research funds and cut sabbaticals so that we'll be forced to go begging at the door of corporate America, and that will solve that problem.
No, I mean, this is what we're seeing all across the country. And, so it's not surprising to me that now when I see this report that, because I've been told every year when I go get my cholesterol checked, well, if your cholesterol goes above a certain level, we're going to give you statin drugs to lower it. And you go, does it help? Well, research says it does. Now we're going, research says it actually might not.
Right, and that's exactly what happened is when, we decided some kind of, corporate gurus got it in their mind and got it in their heads that basically what to do to public higher education is basically to, basically to privatize and kind of shop it out to corporate America. Because what it used to be the case, when we used to actually believe in public investments in research, both at the level of the government for the National Institute of Health and so on, but also at the university level, we believe that it was important to have objective research that is not clouded by kind of corporate interest, right? But as you strip away the research funding and you welcome more and more corporate dollars into both government research and public university research, this is where you end up. You end up with research that ends up serving the purposes for the PR firms of major, drug companies, not just drug companies. Drug companies are a big beneficiary, but all sorts of products, right? Once you kind of you're shopping out kind of researchers just in order to kind of prove something that the corporation already wants, regardless of the outcome, you're lost. And that's part of the problem. But this is exactly what's going on. This is an attack on knowing. It's the attack on objectivity. It's the attack on our ability as a people to have some baseline to kind of decide whether something is good or bad. Everything now is moving towards spin, and it's freaking scary.
And it is scary. And the sad reality is, as these institutions are continually destroyed, people like me looking for good information, it becomes that much harder to get and that much harder to believe what might be good or bad information.
It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. I mean, how do you begin to evaluate? Especially when, look, it'd be one thing if we invested billions of dollars into critical analysis and critical thinking, and that's what we prioritize in our teaching from K through 12 right up through higher education. But the fact is that we're discouraged from doing that at the higher education level and through K through 12. At K through 12, it's through this kind of mass regime of standardized testing. In higher education, it's about the abuse of adjunct labor as kind of 65 to 70% of the labor force, people who are kind of living in precarious work situations right across the board. So if you basically, on the one hand, you've got people who are trying to do good work, who would like to do critical thinking, but frankly, they're work too hard for too little pay in order to kind of be able to kind of sustain the kind of critical thinking that we need. And they don't have no job protection. And this is the kind of thing that makes my life so frustrating. I got into this business in higher education, right, in order to advance the cause of democracy, to advance critical thinking skills, to do that kind of training of the next generations of citizens that could critically think. And, basically we're being overwhelmed by these right-wing nutjob politicians on the one hand, right, the corporate Democrats who are all convinced that, testing is the way to go, and the corporations who are just looking to buy out the shells of public institutions that we're leaving behind.
I happened to see I had a new Twitter follower who kept barraging out education tweets, and the one tweet that he said he put out is, look at 1850 today. Our education system is the same, and you have these people out there who think that we need to have the latest, greatest widgets and all of the technology and all of this stuff to make education better. And I'm going, no, I got to be honest. All the widgetry and gimmickry, I don't know that makes it any better.
No, it doesn't. It actually takes away from it. Look, you can have technology. You can do really good things with technology to kind of improve, like the way that students engage in the world, right? To engage with technology critically. But what we're seeing as the whole trend in higher education is right now is they're looking for ways of using technology to replace people, to replace faculty. Right? They want to take the teacher out of the equation so they kind of automate this as much as possible. And in reality, we learn from history, we know what that actually means. It doesn't mean to actually take the teacher out of it. It means to basically deprofessionalize, right, cut their wages, and put them in a situation where they're forced to check any box you want them to do just so they can keep their job. Yeah. And that's the direction that things are going, and that's what's not good.
So we see this situation in Boston where they're looking at cutting 400 of the, I think it's like 1,270 full and part-time faculty there. About 775 of them are non-tenured track of where these 400 are going to come from. So the majority, as you pointed out, the majority at this university are non-tenured track, basically adjunct professors who at their contract may not be renewed. And this is kind of the direction Pennsylvania is going. And I know you and APSCUF, your union, are fighting back against this.
That's right. I mean, if you take the national trend is basically to, have like I said, 65, 70% of the faculty being adjuncts who are getting paid per course, like around $2,000 per course, no permanent job protections, no health insurance, right? And in order, to drive down costs. Our union, right, ABSCUF, which represents the faculty at the 14 state universities in Pennsylvania, we basically have the opposite of that. Right, our contract kind of limits the number of adjuncts or part-time faculty to 25%, and those faculty at our universities, most of them, around 90% of them, are full-time, and they get paid on scale with tenured and tenure-track faculty members. Right, they don't get some of the steps that you get, but they get health care, they get benefits, just like everybody else. And what they're trying to do right now in the state systems, they're trying to kind of basically strip that away. They're trying to break that part of the union contract and basically turn the mass majority of faculty members at the state system of higher education into academic peace workers, into adjuncts getting paid per course. And this is right now, and we're approaching a year in negotiation. We've been negotiating for 18 months now. ABSCUF has been negotiating for 18 months now. We've been working without a contract for almost a year now. At the end of June, it'll be a year. And the state system is just going back to its old tricks. And if you listen to their statements that they put out about their recent contract proposals, I mean, you're thinking, like, do these people even know what's on the page? And then you realize, it looks like Ken Marshall. Ken Marshall is the spokesperson for PASHE. He must have taken a bite out of the kind of Orwellian apple to kind of like release his internal doublespeak, because it's like a Seinfeld episode reading their public statements. It's like up is down, down is up, cats and dogs sleeping together. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, look, what they're proposing right now is they're looking at the massive tuition hikes, which they've been inflicting on students, and they're saying that this is, quote unquote, more fair. Right? They're looking at exploiting adjuncts and increasing their course load, and they're calling that modernization of academic work. They look at the increased workload of being put on. They want to increase the number of courses adjuncts are forced to teach to be considered full-time, and they call that allowing adjuncts to focus on teaching. Right? They talk about a shift in $9 million in healthcare costs onto faculty's back, and they call this an update to the healthcare plan. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you can't get your head around, but it can't help making you absolutely pissed off. And this is just the second time around, the second go of contract negotiations that the state system has been pretty clear as to what they're trying to do is they're trying to break the union. They're trying to basically turn us, as Ken Mash, the president of ABSCUF, said last week, turn us in the direction of Trump University by looking at all these schemes and divesting from the thing that makes education the most important, and that's the faculty that teach the classes.
It's angering, it's frustrating, it's all of those things. What do you do to change that?
Well, I think what it comes right down to it is that you look at what the Verizon workers did, right? And I think what the Verizon workers did is the answer right now. The only way that we are going to be in a situation that we're going to be able to put a stop to this is to stand up and fight back directly. Our president, Ken Mash, has been pretty clear about the fact that if there is not a movement in the direction towards serious negotiations where you can get toward a fair contract, the give and take of negotiations, then this faculty is going to have to take a stand. And I think we're at that point. We came very close to going on strike during our last round of negotiations, and PASHE has basically come back with virtually the same proposals that they came the last time around. And I think that's what's going to take. And it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a battle that's going to say, okay, are we willing to stand up and defend this thing called public higher education to ensure access for students so they're not going to get ripped off by every little privatization scheme that comes along? That we're not going to allow the quality of our work, the quality of education, to be degraded systematically by people who really have no investment in the future kind of critically thinking citizens and the future of our democratic commonwealth. We're just going to have to take it to them, and that's really what it comes down to, Rick. I don't think there's any other way around it. It's a rational discussion, serious kind of, back and forth. Let's look at the facts. That has been so far off the table for so long when it comes to what they're doing, trying to do, the administration is trying to do to public higher education in this state, that it's about standing up and fighting back and drawing that line in the sand that we will not cross.
What do you think the chances are of there being a work action here in the fall?
Good. I think the chances are good unless we see some major turnaround in in what the state system is putting on the table.
Now, do you think that this is the state system trying to call the bluff, not seeing if see how far they can go? Because I can't imagine that it would be good for them to cause what to me appears to be a needless work stoppage.
No, well, I do think they're kind of like, poking at the snake. You know what I mean? I think they're poking at us, and they kind of want to see if they can provoke it. But I think it's a little bit different. They want to test our resolve, and they've got proposals in their latest kind of like 100+ page proposals that they put out on this past Friday. That's basically seeing if they can split the union, to see if they can break the union. They're pitting full-time tenure-track faculty members against adjunct faculty members. They're saying, we'll increase the course load of those temporary adjunct faculty members so that you can spend more time on your research, right? They're trying to do those splits, and they want to see if they can take some of the power away from the union. And the only way that you fight back with that is kind of to demonstrate your power, in my view. Right, is to say that, look, you want to see who's actually really on the side of public education. We'll prove you wrong, right? And you look at the numbers of high-paid administrators that they've brought onto their roles over the past 5-10 years, right? And the number of faculty that they've cut and the programs that they've cut during that same period of time. It's not hard to demonstrate where the interests lie. It's showing that they're lining their own pockets, right, while they kind of construct some kind of abstract crisis when really what they're after is power and control and a kind of, a deprofessionalizing of higher education in this state.
Yeah.
And faculty are going to have to decide if this is something they believe in or not. And frankly, based upon our last legislative assembly this past spring and what happened during our last round of negotiations, I think faculty are just about fed up that we're saying, look, we can't afford to let this go any longer because we care so much about what we're supposed to be doing, right, that we just have to draw that line. We have to stick to it. So, the way I look at it is like this. This summer is all about preparation. It's all about kind of getting everyone ready. And if they want the fight on their hands, well, it's going to get brought right to their doorstep.
Not something I want to see, but I understand that, at a certain point you get pushed into a corner where there's no option left. And maybe this is what it takes. And maybe this is what it takes not just with professors and university faculty, but with workers across every sector and every industry in this country.
I think that's right. And something? It's like you look at what the Verizon workers did. And I think the Verizon workers did all of us an incredible service. Not only did they ended up getting a great contract, right? But they said that there's sometimes that you have to stand up for what is right. It's not just about the pocketbook issues, but it's saying that we have to put a stop to this greed-grubbing kind of trend that we're on. And, the funny thing is like one of the proposals that PASHE put forward in this past Friday was basically letting the administration, right, letting university presidents move faculty to whatever the department they feel like, right, based upon what they think the needs are, or to move them to different sites at will. And all I kept on thinking is like, this is just like the Verizon situation, which they were taking workers and they were shipping them off to some site, for 2 months at a time, away from their families, just because they didn't feel like hiring the appropriate number of workers to cover those shifts.
Or they wanted to get rid of them.
That's right. And they're doing the exact same thing here. I saw that language there. I'm like, man, it's like there's a big conference up there, like somewhere in some secret location, that all these corporate heads and kind of heads of state university systems are getting together and say, let's try this one next, because that's what they're going after. And so thank God for the Verizon strikers that basically kind of maybe it's a wake-up call for us all that we're drawing that line in the sand, and we'll go one day longer if that's what it takes.
So last question I've got for you. What can I do to help?
Rick, every chance. Number one, everything that you've done, that you keep on putting these things, the voices on the air is fantastic. Anytime that we can get people from ABSCUF kind of coming on your show to talk about what's going on, to say what are the issues that are going to be behind this, and just help getting that message out is the best thing. When we come up and we have actions coming in the fall, you can guarantee that I'm going to be giving you a call. We'd love to have you on site for some of those actions, right? So we can get you out there and to say, you've been one of the strongest supporters and strongest voices of the working class in the state, right? The one who kind of understands these more than anyone else, and to have you alongside us would be absolutely incredible.
Well, anything I can do, I'm right there with you, because I believe in what you guys do, and I believe in public higher education. And if we lose that battle, we unfortunately lose the war. So this is where the working class has to die.
You got it.
Kevin, great talking with you. I appreciate the time.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.
Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Just about due. I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. The United Nations is having a bad week. Last week, a report on children in armed conflict named a Saudi Arabian military coalition as being responsible for crimes against children in Yemen. That infuriated the Saudis, and according to Foreign Policy magazine, they threatened the UN that if their name was not removed, they'd encourage their allies to pull funding for the organization. On Monday, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon caved, announcing that Saudi Arabia's name would be removed. Before a skeptical press corps Thursday, Ban begged for understanding.
This was one of the most painful and difficult decisions I have had to make.
Faced with losing money or prestige, better to pick the latter, he seemed to say.
We need a Secretary General who will, stand up to bullies. And that's what Saudi Arabia was in this case.
Joe Becker is the Advocacy Director for the Children's Rights Division at Human Rights Watch.
The UN is always going to be dependent on contributions from member states. So the potential for these kinds of shenanigans will always be there. But succumbing to that really undermines the UN's mandate, certainly its human rights agenda.
20 organizations joined Human Rights Watch in condemning the UN's decision, including the Global Justice Center. Akila Radhakrishnan is the legal director there, and while the center doesn't work in Yemen, she said the UN's ability to name and shame countries for all sorts of behavior is a key part of ensuring accountability.
There is very specific delisting criteria that involves engaging in time-bound commitments with the UN, verification before you get taken off the list. So removing a country for exerting pressure that has nothing to do with them redressing the crimes that were committed or the issues that were at hand is incredibly problematic.
For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. On NBC Nightly News, correspondent Hallie Jackson highlighted the June 9th USA Today investigation into Donald Trump's history of refusing to pay his bills.
A USA Today Network special report discovering at least 60 lawsuits, plus hundreds of other liens and judgments over the last 3 decades from people who say Trump and his businesses stiffed them. Not just some of Trump's own lawyers, but a dishwasher, a plumber, waiters, and bartenders. Lots of who you might call little guys. Late tonight, the campaign directed NBC News to statements made by the Trumps. Ivanka insisting it would be irresponsible for her father to pay contractors for work he didn't like. Trump himself arguing that's the kind of attitude the country should have.
As New York Magazine's Jesse Singal writes, quote, "It suggests a guy who views just about any interaction he has with anyone as a chance to get one over on them." Media Matters found that ABC was the only broadcast network to ignore the USA Today report in its June 9th evening and June 10th morning news programs. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to TheRickSmithShow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at TheRickSmithShow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Roseanne DeMauro of National Nurses United was a Bernie Sanders pick to sit on the 15-member DNC Platform Writing Committee, but the DNC refused to accept her because she represents organized labor. You heard that right. Democrats told Sanders his pick could not be on the committee because she's union. Only one other retired labor person is on the committee. DeMauro spoke out about it on KPFA Pacifica's Workweek Radio.
The critical point here is there's 15 people in this drafting committee. They chose someone who I believe is a retiree from AFSCME. And you think about how bad the DNC actually is, because working people built this country. They built the Democratic Party, and now they think it's overrepresented with one person. It's really outrageous, and it's a slap in the face to the American people, and it's why the Democratic Party is losing so many people and will continue to lose them, frankly.
DeMauro says she would have used her position on the DNC platform committee to push for single-payer health care, Medicare for all. She says she would have been open about it with the American people as the committee wrote the platform. DeMauro says big changes are needed in the Democratic Party to honor and respect rather than marginalize labor.
The corporate class controls both parties. This symbolizes more than anything is the fact that they think that basically pushing labor aside is okay. It's become okay. And that tells you everything of why the Democratic Party isn't okay.
AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says the Democratic Party platform must offer a comprehensive, integrated vision of how we can rewrite the rules to raise wages for all working people and make our government a partner in our hopes for better lives. Trumka says the key to addressing wage stagnation and inequality is rebuilding workers' bargaining power. A bold Democratic Party agenda is needed, Trumka says, to address a range of serious issues facing working people, from opposing trade deals like the TPP to modernizing and putting teeth into labor laws. Trumka says the Democratic vision of America is that we are stronger together. Trumka says the Democratic platform must strengthen and expand Social Security and Medicare, offer comprehensive immigration reform, and financial policies that support Main Street jobs and small businesses, not more speculation on Wall Street.
Workers Independent News is heard daily on The Rick Smith Show, live 3 to 6 p.m. coast to coast at thericksmithshow.com. The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So I came across this proposal that our friends at the Badass Teachers Association has put together, this idea for a White House conference on education and equity, the idea of talking about K through 12 education and reclaiming the rights of all children to a free public education. Thought it'd be a great opportunity to talk about that, which is why we've asked Sue Gongaroffs. She is the Badass Teachers Association's meme team director, and this was also her idea. Sue, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you for asking me. I'm the co-director, actually, with Kathy Wing-Larson. But we are bats through and through, and it's really nice to be on your show today.
I appreciate it.
About it.
Appreciate you taking. So what is the meme team?
Well, the meme team, we basically create the visual messaging for bats. Nothing goes through on our page with a bad apple on it, and gets spread through without because we create the images ourselves, and we try not to do anything wrong as far as the messaging is concerned, and the team actually helps the quality control on what we do.
I give you guys the utmost credit because some of your stuff is some of the best that I see out there with regards to public education. And it's something that I've been calling for years now, to where our most educated, most eloquent, best speaking, most articulate people are stepping forward and defending not just education, but working class values.
Well, that's a really high compliment thank you very much, because we work very hard on it. You've got a team of about 15, 20 people. Who are very active. All are either retired or are teachers. We know the pain, and a lot of our memes come organically from our memberships and from Maine. Good quotes. I think we meme a lot of quotes. We make sure it's accurate. We have people who are spell checks fanatics. We try to make sure the best is always given to our bats because our bats give us the best.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this proposed White House conference on education and equity. I understand that this was your idea?
Well, this came from an idea I had a few years ago based on some experience that I had before I became a teacher and a parent, before even probably God was a boy. I worked for Jimmy Carter's. I was a presidential management intern at the Department of Commerce, because I was an arts administration major, I was placed in the economic development team that had to do with what arts do for inner cities, because Mr. Carter had an inner city economic development group that went on, and it was launched through a White House conference, which we grew to. Most people in the government back then really looked at the White House conference as a way of bringing people together who have expertise to affect policy going across the entire government, looking at all aspects of specific information of what we needed. And because I had that experience, and then I went on after that experience, I went on to higher education to do some grant work and some research there. So I got to know the DuPont Circle group pretty well. I think they moved to 17th Street now. But this was a long time in my head about how do we affect change that is not top-down, that is grassroots origin, and how do we get our voice back? Because teachers are completely being cut off of the conversation about how we would like our education, public education, to continue.
Right. I would argue not just cut off. I would actually argue demonized and made to be the cause of any ills or problems our education system has.
Yes. Our professionalism has been attacked. Our unions have been attacked. Almost every aspect of what we do, everything we love about teaching, is being taken away because of privatization or because of this testing. We see it as the White House paper, if you wrote it, if you saw it, it does outline very specifically how both sides of the aisle have really come down on us pretty hard. And and we don't deserve it, because we're some of the hardest working people in the world.
Agreed.
So we said, when BATS was formed, this became, for me, for the last 3 years, we're 3 tomorrow. BATS are 3 tomorrow. Congratulations to us.
Yeah, and, happy anniversary.
Thank you. And we are, I've been retired for the last 2 years, but this idea of bringing a grassroots movement into the national profile, into the national discussion, so that we can examine the policies that have been used against us. We've now been able to identify most of them. We're basically doing what Rev Barber, from Moral Mondays has said. We're building a stage. We look at both sides. We've analyzed both sides. We had a whole team of people looking at the ESA, for example, and what that meant. That meant we had a whole team of people looking at that. We combined our energies on that, and we saw a lot of privatization language in there. And yet our original document, our original enabling legislation, we used to call it in public admin, but our Elementary Secondary Education Act was devoted to social justice and civil rights and equity. And nothing has been done like this since Eisenhower, since almost 50 years.
Wow. And
so we have not come together as a profession, and many groups, deformers, have come together and had summits. There have been White House summits, but there has not been a White House conference of the caliber that I'm telling exists. Because when a White House conference is called, it's because usually there are a series of issues that are impacting negatively, and let's see what we can do to fix it in a positive way.
Right.
And that's what BATS is all about.
So what do you think the chances of this happening are? Because, I've had a couple of conversations recently with folks who look at, the Brown versus Board of Education decision and have said, we should pine to go back to the separate but equal days, because at least we would get some equality.
Really?
Well, because
I don't know who you're talking to, but
I think their point is that things are so unequal now.
Oh, I see what you mean.
That things have gone even almost back to where we started from. So at least the argument of arguing for some equality would be there. Now, obviously, these folks are on the right side of it. They're just arguing that we've gone really, really in the wrong direction.
Well, I'm not sure where their heads are at, but my guess is that the privatizers, in my own opinion, are pretty much Jim Crow people. And I live in Virginia. I was raised and educated in New York. I'm the child of a mailman. My dad was a mailman, and he was a union activist. My mother was a tailor. Neither of them were educated beyond high school. But I can tell you that where I grew up, and the way I was educated, we came separate. It was not equal. You cannot have a public school system which has been gutted and devoided of special services and special needs for kids, and a private system that caters to these without calling that Jim Crow. And that's kind of the way I feel about that.
Do you see that there's room to have a privatized system and a public system?
Well, there is, if we don't have to have public money siphoned off to you to pay for it. Here in Alexandria, I'm very proud to live in Alexandria, and when I moved here in the 70s, when I came down for Carter, 70% of our public schools was African American. But even though 30% of Alexandria City itself was African American, so there was a disconnect there, because after the 59 closing of the schools, the governor closed the schools in 59 to avoid desegregation. So these people here in Alexandria have been moving very steadily upward toward equal in their schools, and it's now almost, I believe, to a point where they're balanced at that 30-70 ratio, which is reflective of the community. They worked hard, even though there's a system of private schools in the area, and they're very good schools. I would never say no to that. They don't rely on public money. They pay taxes, but they're not, but they're right here, and the people of Alexandria have worked very hard for that, and it's a very interesting kind of look-see at how that's evolved since I've been living here.
Interesting.
So equal, yes, fine, that's wonderful. Private schools, wonderful, but if you're taking public money out of public schools to subsidize the elite, you're doing something wrong. And clearly it's a wrong thing to do, and they know it's a wrong thing to do, but they're doing it anyway.
I look at New York, and Mayor de Blasio has gotten himself into some hot water over there's been a call to redraw some of the school boundaries to get to some of that equality and some of the numbers that you've pointed out, and he's pushed back against it, saying people have bought and invested into these homes and these neighborhoods because of the schools, and that's the rationale for not redrawing the lines. And I would argue that kind of gentrification is kind of a reason why every once in a while maybe you might want to.
Well, the gentrification down here in the South, in Virginia, is basically done kind of without anybody talking about it.
I think that's not just in Virginia. I think that's everywhere.
Yeah, and I think that's the undemocratic part about it. I live in a fully integrated neighborhood. Most people I know do. We used the public schools. We advocated for our kids. We worked hard in the public schools to make them as best as we can. We do everything we can as people to support public systems because our tax dollars are involved in that.
Right.
And if and the thing is that there's tuition involved in privatization eventually, unless you're subsidizing from the public coffers, that's the wrong part of it. So failing to address the inequity of the way things are moving in this country toward charter privatization public schools have no choice but to fight back and become something else, to become something new. We need to rebuild what has been taken away and reclaim what we know is to be the right course of action.
And that's where this request for a White House conference on education and equity comes from. What are the chances of this happening?
Well, I have we knew the chances were very slim to none when we proposed it, but we're trying to follow what we believe is the right course of action, which is to get public attention in a primary year. That's really not easy, especially since the public education kind of has a media blackout on it. They don't want to discuss K-12. It's not in either of their platforms, the candidates. So we noticed that, and we said, you know what? This is what we believe is happening, and this is the realistic way of looking at it. And we're here to let our experts help us work this out. The chances of anyone taking what we're saying seriously is slim to none if people don't hear what we're saying and say, you know, that's the right way to think about this. We're not hearing anything about K through 12 from either of these candidates, either of the front runners. We're hearing about college and university from one. But I have to tell you, not hearing it's become. I think I heard this word on your show, this term. It's become the third rail of politics. K-12.
Yeah.
And Rick, that shouldn't be part of a campaign. When you're talking about how much pain has been going on, and I mean real pain. When you go on the back pages and you read some of the stories about how teachers are being forced out and you read how sad the kids are during testing season and how desperate they are. We're teachers. We want to protect our children, our students, but we also have to protect ourselves and our integrity, and we have to call it the way we see it. So the chances politically of this going on in this one, unless I'm wrong, a bad analyst, which I'm not, I'm a very good one, slim to none. But we're going to we're in there for the long haul. We're not, whatever goes on, we're going to have to keep moving forward, no matter who becomes president, because the local elections are counting on us. We have to make sure that we're getting candidates in there who are going to fully fund our schools.
Do you see any difference between the two? What appears to be Hillary and Donald Trump? Do you see much of a difference on their education stances?
I see, and I'm going to be very honest, and I am a Democrat. I think Donald Trump is not going to unify his party because his party has become. I live right close to Washington, remember, so I understand, I see some of this stuff going on all the time. The extremists have hijacked the Republican Party. There are some really nice people who are walking around calling themselves Republican, and they're now afraid to say the word Republican because of it. And I think the consolidated media that we have, the 6 corporations that own our media, are not going to let anything out about issues, and they're going to be dealing with these candidates as celebrities and as a horse race, they call it. So so in terms of bats, though, is we have overwhelmingly Democrat on our in the bats. We have a distinct preference for Bernie Sanders. We also are in the business of teasing out, because this is what bats do. We tease out a lot of the hyperbole and hyperbolic kind of rhetoric, and we have to get to the meat of and substance of what is being said. And when we looked at ESA, for example, now Donald wants to get rid of the Department of Education. We think that's a little bit drastic. We think that's being fed by a lot of his right-wing lack of knowledge. A lot of the people who want to privatize education because of hedge funding. We really do see people who are opportunistic on that side. And
it's a reactionary talking point.
I'm sorry?
It's a reactionary talking point. It's
Exactly.
It's one of the only things that Rick Perry could remember.
Exactly. And the fact is that we looked at Hillary and her platform called Teach Strong, and I've done battle on Twitter with some people who thought that was just wonderful, except that it was written by people who never stepped foot in a classroom. Or if they did, it was through TFA or whatever, some other organization that does not represent experienced teachers. But it's very well funded. So the funding, who is what we see on ESA though too is, and I always sound a little stupid when I say this, so please forgive me.
All right.
But Pay for Success is a hedge funder's dream come true, and this is going after the early pre-K program, where it's giving Goldman Sachs control of the school system, and it's denying special ed services to kids who need it, but the banks will be paid back.
And that's all that's really important, isn't it?
The least moral, the least ethical, the least professional kind of platform.
I'm with you. So last question I've got for you. How can we help? I believe you guys have an action that you're trying to get people to sign letters for, right?
Yeah, when I I'm the one that, I don't know if you've seen our little announcements about who's being on your show, which we are very proud of. I designed those myself.
And you do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. I did hook on the form that we wanted BATS to sign the petition, and I encourage all teachers, not just BATS, to take a look at the petition. It is on I believe it's on our blog post. It's on our website. They could go and not become a BAT if they don't want to. By the way, Rick, many teachers are still very afraid to become BATs. There is a real fear of speaking out. I live in a right-to-work state, you can imagine. Okay.
No, I've spoke to teachers from Virginia, and the one woman I spoke to that really sticks out in my mind had to use an alias because she was that afraid of being found out.
Yes,
because of what might happen.
Yes, it's speaking out. Even though our union groups are wonderful here, we're allowed to have them. They're called associations. There's not much they can do when you're fighting against a right-to-work mentality. And so, and there is a lot of oppression because of the Broad, who is Eli Broad. You've heard of the Broad leadership. Yeah. Well, those people have really been appointed or elected or whatever they do, and they are in charge. And I believe that they're siloists. They come along and they make sure teachers are not talking to each other so that we don't get any strange ideas about
organizing.
And
or White House conferences to talk about education and equity. And the hope is that folks will go to thericksmithshow.com, click on Sue's name. I'll take you right to the actionnetwork.org page where you can sign the letter. You can propose the White House conference and help the BATS and education move forward. Sue, it was great talking with you.
Oh, it's so great to talk to you, too. I'm such a big fan of yours.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'd love to have you come back again and talk to us as this continues.
You call me anytime you want to talk.
Fantastic.
I'm hopefully the coalition rally is coming up, and I'm looking forward to working with people and talking about how important the visual image is.
Outstanding.
We've got a lot to do.
A lot of work to do. Sue, thanks so much.
God bless you. Thank you.
You as well. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
They're blue for me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1914. That was the day that the Miners' Union Day Parade was scheduled in Butte, Montana. In spite of the festivities, trouble was brewing down in the copper mines. Many of the miners were growing increasingly aggravated with the Butte Miners Union Local 1, part of the Western Federation of Miners. Local 1 had been established in 1893, but some thought the union was too closely affiliated with the mine owners. Wages had been stagnant for more than 3 decades, despite the fact that the price of copper had more than doubled during that time. Mine owners stirred the pot even more by hiring Pinkerton detectives to infiltrate the union, instructed to promote violence. The day before the parade, 1,200 miners refused to show their union cards at the Speculator Mine. This meant that they were turned away from work. The next day, the miners' parade was met with jeers and taunts. Some of the protesters chased the union officials, who were riding in the parade on horseback. The angry crowd swelled and decided to attack the union headquarters. They ripped apart the union offices and tore out the union safe. They took the safe to a field and blew off the door with dynamite, finding $1,350 inside. Alderman Frank Curran tried to disperse the crowd, but they tossed him out of the second-story window of the union's office. Fortunately, he landed in a pile of carpeting that had been ripped out by the angry mob. He escaped with a broken arm and dislocated ankle. 10 days later, an unknown assailant blew up the miners' union hall. Citing the violence they had encouraged as an excuse, the mining company declared it would no longer recognize the union. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. On NBC Nightly News, correspondent Hallie Jackson highlighted the June 9th USA Today investigation into Donald Trump's history of refusing to pay his bills.
A USA Today Network special report discovering at least 60 lawsuits, plus hundreds of other liens and judgments over the last 3 decades from people who say Trump and his businesses stiffed them. Not just some of Trump's own lawyers, but a dishwasher, a plumber, waiters, and bartenders. Lots of who you might call little guys.
Late tonight, the campaign directed NBC News to statements made by the Trumps. Ivanka insisting it would be irresponsible for her father to pay contractors for work he didn't like. Trump himself arguing that's the kind of attitude the country should have.
As New York Magazine's Jesse Singal writes, quote, "It suggests a guy who views just about any interaction he has with anyone as a chance to get one over on them." Media Matters found that ABC was the only broadcast network to ignore the USA Today report in its June 9th evening and June 10th morning news programs. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Organizing America 3 hours each night. The Rick Smith Show.
And the radio is in the hands of such a lot of fools trying to anesthetize the way that you feel. Radio is a sound salvation. Radio is cleaning up the nation.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So again, I highly suggest going to the ricksmithshow.com, clicking on Sue's name. I'll take you right to their page to sign up to say, look, we want to have this White House conference on education and equity. We want to have the discussion about saving public education K through 12. We want our public schools, and we want the best we can possibly get. And at the end of it, what I enjoy, what I think is fabulous about what the Bats are doing is it's just grassroots organizing. These are teachers who don't get paid for doing this. This is their passion. This is their focus. This is their career. It's why they wake up in the morning, which is why I think it's so important that we recognize the work that they do. And that's why I've asked Michael Flanagan to come talk with us. He's the Badass Teachers Association's Action Team Director. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. Thank you. Thank you for having us on to discuss this White House conference.
So, as we were talking about with Sue in the last segment, What do you think the chances of this coming to fruition are? What do you think the chances of actually getting the White House to move?
Well, there'd be no chance if we weren't pushing the issue. It'll never happen unless we knock down doors and ring the bells to bring it apart. This current administration and the previous presidential administration have gone out of the way to silence teachers and marginalize us in their efforts to privatize public education. They see it as a cash cow that they're going to they're going to eviscerate, and the thing to that they need to do to make that happen is to eliminate teacher voice. And this Democratic administration has they're supposed to stand up for the working class. They're supposed to stand up for people of color in our country. And what they really have been doing is standing up for the corporate interests. So if we don't make noise, it'll never happen. So, that's our view of it.
I have these conversations with people who evidently drank the Kool-Aid and believe the privatization, the competition model is the best way to go, and that public dollars should be funding these charters, which we know do no better a job at educating, and in a lot of cases actually do a worse job of educating our children. But there are people who truly believe this, Michael, as much as you believe that public education is something we should be fighting for. You've got those on the other side who have been really indoctrinated to believe that this new technology, this new factory assembly line kind of education is the right way to go.
Right. Well, all of those people are basically, that's starting from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. That's coming from corporate entities. That's coming from billionaires and hedge funders. That's coming from mainstream media, which is following the corporate narrative. But if you come down to the rank and file teachers, if you come down to the community members, they have not been drinking the Kool-Aid. Yes, public schools over the years have been fraught with major issues that we try to address. But in their effort, the privatizers' effort, I call them corporate reformers, in their effort to destroy the public schools, they have defunded them. They have targeted communities of color, largely in the inner cities, and they control the narrative. They control the politicians. They control the media, and they have all the money. So when people say, this is, people are drinking the Kool-Aid, this is what they're believing, it's the same, reason that, that we're believing that we only have two choices in our political race. When you're told a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. And that's pretty much what's happened. If you ask the average community member if they have trust in their teachers and trust in their community schools, they will tell you yes. They will bring up all the problems supposedly with underachieving students and low test scores. But if you ask them if they're happy with their school and their teachers, the answer is yes.
Yeah, it comes back to the same argument you see in Congress. Congress has an approval rating right around herpes. But yet, if you ask someone if they think their congressperson is good, most of them go, yeah, and the numbers are mind blowing. My God, mine's okay, everything else sucks. So the question is, how do you push back from that narrative?
Right. Well, that's where there's plenty of grassroots organizations. BATS was formed 3 years ago, or going on 3 years ago. And, for me, as a public school teacher for 30 years now, I'm in the public school system, I had no way to push back against the narrative, the business model, and then eventually Common Core, and before that, No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top. We were just getting inundated with one reform technique after the other, vouchers, and then charter schools. And we had nothing to say. You would, the narrative that the mainstream media wants to say is the teachers' unions and the teachers' unions. And what happens is the teacher union leadership is not really speaking up for the needs of the rank and file teachers. In my personal opinion, the leadership was co-opted to that narrative, to the Common Core, the high stakes testing narrative. So, the people who were supposed to voice our concerns were kind of co-opted. They just were going along with the narrative and not pushing back. So the badass teachers came along, and we're not beholden to money. As you just said in the intro, we're not paid. We work hours and hours doing this because it needs to be done. There's no money in this for us, but it's love and it's protecting our career. So now through Badass Teachers and other grassroots organizations, we have a voice to push back, to organize, and to create this proposed White House conference that 3 years ago we would not have even been able to get off the ground. It would have been one or two people all by themselves, and it's easy to silence one or two people. It is much more difficult to silence 50,000 people, most of them, intellectuals and educated professionals who are dedicated and feel righteous about this need. So no, we're not being shut up. And if you speak loud enough, eventually you will be heard.
Right. And the hope is that as other teachers hear this, and hopefully there are teachers, and I've spoken with teachers who, like as you pointed out, they're afraid of being picked off and being targeted. As more come out of the woodwork and more come out of the shadows, the hope is that you then begin to really influence change by pursuing things like this conference and other things once more teachers come out of the shadows.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of what we do in BATS is, we try actions, we try supporting, but a lot of what we've done is organize people and disseminate information. I always use myself as the example. 3 years ago, I'm sitting in my classroom and I'm thinking I'm the only one this is happening to. I'm the only one that, every year it's a new, it's a new, fresh, directive from centralized departments of education about this is how we'll do it, this is how we'll do it. And, they start picking people off, like you said, one at a time. And then I found a group of people who were saying the same thing from states all over, Tennessee, Florida, Chicago, California, and you realize you're not alone in this. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the same exact boat, and it is much harder to knock down 50,000 people than it is to knock down one or two people in their own classrooms.
Right, and as I'm sure you've found out that the other side is well organized, well funded, and that this is a national strategy, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can take away New York State, which is where I'm from, and I could basically run down the techniques, vouchers, value-added modeling for evaluations, high-stakes testing, charter schools, major testing companies like Pearson. I could take away the name New York State, and those same techniques can apply to every state in the union, the same exact techniques. And it's across the aisle. It's Democrats and Republicans. They both have their hooks into the cash cow, which is public education, and they're out to take no prisoners. And yes, they are well funded. They are the most powerful, the richest, and most influential people in this country. The only thing we have going for us is numbers and heart, because it's our children, it's our careers, and it's our neighborhood. So, once the money dries up, they're leaving. We, as teachers and parents, are not going anywhere. So we'll see how it works. I wish we had money and someone speaking out for us that has some sort of influence. But until that time we're going to speak for ourselves.
Yeah, it does seem interesting that all of the moneyed interests and all of the spokespeople are well paid. And I look at someone like, what's her name? Campbell Brown is one of the proper response, I understand. But you look at those kind of folks, people like Bill Gates, who, they're pushing these kind of education reforms without really actually, as I understand, ever stepping foot as a teacher in a classroom.
Right. Well, Bill Gates he's at the top of the heap because he's he's basically supporting the agenda that the Obama administration has put in. But I was in the large high schools in the city when Bill Gates came in with this idea to break up larger public high schools in urban environments, people of color, and he was going to break them up and to make them into small schools. So that lasted 5 years, and then he realized that, at the end of the day, the problem isn't the size of the school. The problem is the poverty and the inequity that our students and our teachers teaching them face. So he got tired of it, and he dropped it. After investing $2 billion in the small school initiative throughout the country, he drops it. Then, he goes in for the test, and now it's Common Core, and that face pushback, and that is failing also, which he invested hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in. And when that fails, what's his next play? What's his next agenda? Why are we letting billionaires determine our public education? He's like a kid with a Lego set playing with people's lives. It's a joke.
That's an interesting analogy. I mean, and that's what he's doing. He's toying with people's lives. And that's why I think the idea of this kind of a conference with people who are actually in the classroom, people who actually are the ones who do the work, is probably not a bad idea.
Right. Well, for our side, it's the only idea. Every time they have these conferences, they have, like you said, Campbell Brown or Michelle Reed before her, or you'll have people from the Broad Institute and, the Waltons, and, they have the millionaires and the billionaires and the talking heads from the television, but you don't have a classroom teacher anywhere. Our biggest, advocate at this time is Diane Ravitch, and, basically her, that's it. You know what I mean? We're creating the pushback ourselves through grassroots, from rank and file teachers, from advocates, and activists. And, if we do, and I shouldn't even say if, when we do get the White House to at least, respond to our push for a national conference, because how can you not? This is our kids. These are our schools. And how can you, just listen to the billionaires and look at the destruction they have visited on our public education? Look at the tax dollars that have gone into the hands of billionaires and hedge funders. And that money, and then just point to Chicago, Detroit. 50 public schools in Chicago closed under Rahm Emanuel, and then he goes and he opens up 31 charter schools, enriching his campaign funders. We're calling that out. That's why they want us quiet, and that's why we have no choice but to push for this White House conference. Call national attention to it.
And it's about time. And hopefully people will go and sign the letter, the request for a White House conference on education and equity. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Michael Flanagan's name. It will take you there. You can sign up, put your name in there, email, all that stuff, and it will help write the letter for you. Michael, last question I've got for you. In looking at this conference and the organizing that needs to go into this, what do you say to teachers who are out there now listening, who are going, well, I'm not quite sure. What's the directive? What would you say to them?
I would say just, basically, follow along. We're starting, we're having in July, we're having a Save Our Schools rally right there in Washington, D.C. We're going to be sitting on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I myself am going to be playing guitar and trying to entertain the people as we amass teachers and parents to come down there to let them know that they're not alone and that we are fighting back. See, the teachers who would be doubting this conference's, let's say, success, they still think that they're alone. They're still scared of being targeted, and they don't realize that they have a voice and they have thousands of people standing behind them. So we in the Badass Teachers and the other grassroots organizations that we work with will stand up first. You know, we'll push the agenda. We'll write the proposals. We'll knock down on all of our connections in the media. You know, we'll stand up. And like I said, you know, before, if we get knocked down, then those teachers who saw us, you know, start the movement, they can come up and continue it. You know, we're not alone. Like I said, the weapon we have is numbers and heart, and we just gotta wake people up that there's a battle out there, and they're already in it, and they might as well join.
There you go. Michael, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
Great talk with you. Want to check out more, badassteachers.blogspot.com. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Also a link to how you can sign up for the White House Conference on Education and Equity. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk.
San Francisco adopts a climate change adaptation tax. Alberta, Canada, home of the tar sands, adopts a carbon tax. U.S. Congress updates toxic chemical regulations for the first time in 40 years. Britain's solar output crushes coal. Plus, a breakthrough in the quest to create an artificial leaf.
There was a quest to create an artificial leaf?
There is now.
Who knew? All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Ripping up the climate agreement that was reached in Paris would be reckless, counterproductive, self-destructive, and it would in the end be an act of ignorance, of utter, unbelievable, contemptuous ignorance.
But how do you really feel about it, Secretary Kerry? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, there has been a surprising spate of good news when it comes to legislation over the past few days. Has there not?
Yeah, don't get used to it.
Really?
There were quite a few big things that got a lot of big votes this week, including one of the first climate change adaptation ballot measures ever to be put before voters. In San Francisco, voters approved a measure to restore wetlands of San Francisco Bay and strengthen coastal communities to prepare for rising sea levels. It looks like the new property tax easily cleared a required 2/3 vote threshold. The estimated $25 million in revenue that's expected per year will go to restoring 10 to 15,000 acres of tidal marshes in San Francisco Bay.
So, who says good things didn't happen at the ballot box on Tuesday?
And in Alberta, Canada, home of the tar sands, the Alberta legislature on Tuesday passed a landmark carbon tax to address climate change. Premier Rachel Notley called it, quote, long overdue in this province.
This is amazing. This is the tar sands oil region. This is where this dirty, sticky, gooey oil that was supposed to come down through the Keystone XL pipeline. This region makes billions of dollars for Canada. It's been on fire for the last month thanks to global warming. And now they're passing a carbon tax in this same area. That's kind of amazing and kind of fantastic.
And all thanks to the big political change that happened less than a year ago when Notley was originally elected.
See, elections do matter, don't they?
Yep. Now, starting in January, the Climate Leadership Implementation Act will levy a fee on all fossil fuels sold in the province, with the revenue going to renewable energy projects and rebated to low and middle income households to offset any higher costs.
Nice.
Here in the U.S., Congress actually did something.
Wait, what?
Yes, an update to the Toxic Substances Control Act, which regulates chemicals in the United States. It's the first update since 1976. It increases the Environmental Protection Agency's authority and oversight of toxic chemicals. Now, everyone on all sides agreed that it was woefully outdated. Environmental groups were very critical of many provisions, but essentially said, this is better than what we have. The chemical industry likes it because it replaces a patchwork of state regulations. Out of some 60,000 chemicals on the market in the U.S., the EPA has tested only 200. This will help change that. In Illinois, electric utility Exelon says it will have to close 2 nuclear power plants that are struggling economically due to the boom in cheaper natural gas and renewable energy sources. Exelon failed to persuade the Illinois state legislature to add nuclear to its clean energy standard. That requires electric utilities to obtain a percentage of their energy from renewable sources. This isn't necessarily good news for the climate because in the absence of a requirement to use zero-carbon nuclear energy, Illinois utilities may instead turn to coal. The UK has set another national solar energy record. Solar power in the UK produced more electricity than coal across the month of May. That's the first time that solar's share of electricity generation in the UK surpassed coal across the whole country over an entire month. 2016 marks the first time that coal has not been Britain's primary electricity source since the late 1800s.
Charles Dickens is weeping.
Finally, a breakthrough in artificial photosynthesis. Harvard University researchers have succeeded in creating what they've called an artificial leaf. It's essentially a liquid battery that mimics the process of photosynthesis, converting water and sunlight into hydrogen like plants do. Lead researcher Professor Daniel Nocera, in a video press release, says the artificial leaf's hydrogen output can be used for many, many things.
Instead of having a gas station, the sun is hitting your house, you have the artificial leaf, you could be generating your own fuel.
It's several years away from commercialization, but it can be done more cheaply and more efficiently than any other experiments with artificial leaves using common materials.
Very cool. Thank you for that report, Desi Doyen. For much more on all of these stories and all the ones that we had to leave behind, am I barking up the wrong tree? Check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. You're welcome. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
I talk to the trees, but they don't listen to me. I talk to the stars. I'm a man with a vision, a boy with a gun. I got a picture in my pocket of a lucky one. I'll announce the winner.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Yes, big mess. You look at this story in the New York Times, and this is where we're going to wrap things up today. Ever heard of debtors' prisons? We always thought, you think of the Dickinsonian era, you think of the old days, you can't pay your taxes, go to prison. Around the 1830s, we decided, maybe we wouldn't do that. The civilized world said, maybe that's a bit extreme, just a little bit. But here's the thing. What we're now in here in the 21st century, here in the U.S., it's a crime almost to be poor because we do have debtors' prisons, and we've seen this. We've seen these stories repeated over and over again. But as the Nicholas Kristof points out, he spent a little time looking at the Tulsa, Oklahoma county jail there, and he goes through the stories of a couple of people. The one woman, this Rosalind Hall, a 53-year-old woman that he describes as a warm, mild-mannered woman with graying hair, evidently spent better part of 18 months in prison, in jail, I guess in short stints here and there, because she didn't pay what he described as a blizzard of fines and fees relating to petty crimes. Evidently, she had to eat and wrote some bad checks, stealing a little bit here and there. Now, this is a person who has struggled with mental illness, has struggled with drug addiction, has a long history of these kind of problems, and the answers, well, huge fines. What you want to know how high? Over the last 2 years, this woman's been trying to turn her life around, trying to do the right thing. She's been saddled with almost over $11,000 in fines and fees and all kinds of stuff. Now, this is a woman who's trying. She's trying to turn things around. She's trying to get her life in order, but she suffers from mental illness and bipolar disorder, which good luck keeping a job with that. Not to mention, every time she turns around, someone's arresting her for not paying fees. And he pointed out that, I guess, 8 years ago, this woman had written 5 bad checks to a local grocery store, which is wrong. You don't write bad checks. If you can't pay for them, you don't do it. Which, to me, if you bounce a check, that's one thing. If you bounce a couple of them, that's something else. I kind of get, but to throw someone in jail for it, I got to wonder. Anyway, the 5 bad checks totaled about $100. So it's not like she's writing $10,000 bad checks, about $100, about $20 per check. So she does some jail time for it, and then she's hit with massive fines and restitution. She owes $1,200 in restitution. Think about that for a second. 8 years ago, wrote bad checks. Every once in a while they come, they pick her up to take her away. Now, this is a woman who survives on food stamps. This is a woman who survives on, she maybe makes $50 a week or $50 a month cleaning houses. $40 of which goes to paying restitution. How do you expect people to live on that? Especially when you're talking about someone with the kind of illness. Now, this is not a violent offender. And there's part of me that goes, there's got to be a better way of treating folks who are struggling. This idea of, and we see this also in Ferguson, Missouri, where a lot of the tension came around. Where I forget what the numbers were. But let's say that there were 10,000 people who lived in the community, and there were like $20,000 tickets and arrest warrants and all kinds of stuff that were going on there. I mean, these are people who were just hammered with tickets and fees and fines and all this, and then put into jail because of it. Because we've decided that we can't raise taxes on rich people. We have to have a prison system that self-perpetuates itself, and we do that by, having high fines on people. Because, and I've gone through this as well, where you look at a $25 ticket for going through a stop sign or something, and there's like $100 in fees and fines associated with it. I mean, it's mind-blowing when you look at this. And in fact, I just found it in 2012. The average household in Ferguson, Missouri, paid $272 in fines, and the average adult had 1.6 arrest warrants issued during that year. And you think about what we've done to turn our police departments into really just not people who keep control of the law, but people who are strictly beating people with the law. I got to tell you, I struggle with it. I struggle with this concept of debtors' prisons. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Got to wrap things up for the day. I want to thank all the people who came on the program and talked with us. If you missed any of the program, thericksmithshow.com is where you go. Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go. And as always, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious,